Good morning. Welcome to the ASTROLABE, brought to you by King Pilled. This episode is sponsored by the esteemed members of the King Pilled Discord server, the top secret community reserved for the true elites. We got a good group of people in there, man. It's great for show prep. It's like my mind has been distributed across the internet, and they bring stuff to my attention. It's very helpful. Good conversation, trustworthy, decent, upstanding human beings. The best group of people on the internet, I dare say. If you'd like to become a member and support the show, go to kingpilled.com, sign up. Man, what a day. The last 24 hours or so. I think of all of the shows that I've ever done, this is the one where I go through my bookmarks and all this stuff and tweets and stories and everything that I've saved, and I open them all up, and then I go through and I whittle them down, I put them in order, and eventually I'm like, okay, I'm not going to have time for this. This story doesn't fit in with everything else. Got to save this for another time, and I go and close them all. I probably did that the most today of any show that I've ever prepped for. And I still don't know if I'm going to possibly be able to keep this under 3 hours. We'll see. We'll see. I've got a lot of video clips to play, some threads to read. I did my own long post that I'm going to read because I can tell it is really, really needed. This is another big, a revelatory event. The debate last night was very revealing in a lot of ways. An apocalypse, one might say, in the true meaning of the word. So I'm going to get into that. But first of all, I want to say my deep respect goes out to the posters out there who managed to hit virality on a regular basis. They have multiple tweets that are just going nuclear all at the same time, and they still manage to interact with the replies. I don't know how it's done. I cannot fathom it. I'm in the middle of easily the most impressions in a 24-hour, and the most impressions in a friggin' 12-hour period that I've ever had in my life. I woke up this morning, my phone was hot, just burning with the notifications. I was like, what on earth is going on? And I checked Twitter, and a couple of my tweets yesterday broke containment and have gone just positively nuclear. I'm telling you guys, if the libs love to yell at the people that pay for Twitter, and you can't not pay for it. You have to pay for Twitter if you want the maximal experience. And I'll tell you this: if you're a smaller account and you want to interact with the larger accounts, I'm not even a large account. I'm getting just a little taste of what it might be to be a large account. And I can tell you, the only way that you're possibly ever going to be able to catch someone's attention is if you're notified. Or sorry, if you're paying for it, if you have the blue check, because that's the only way that I'm going to be able to filter down the comments. There's no way that I can keep up with everything else. Interesting. It says the chat was messed up. So you guys could hear me, but the chatting wasn't working. It looks like it's back now. I didn't get any notification that anything was wrong on my end, but that's very interesting. When I first created the stream and published it, it gave me an error message. Said, your operation failed, try again. I thought, well, that was odd. So I went and looked, and the stream was up, and everything looked good, and I connected it. And people were chatting before we went live, but weird. Okay, chat and Jim Bob's was messed up. Okay. So it sounds like there was a YouTube issue. I wonder if there's got to be a ton of people streaming right now. Yeah, this is interesting. Streaming is becoming the new podcasting. This is an observation that's become clear to me recently. This is the next iteration. Podcasting broke out and it was a thing, and then streaming was like people did it for video games or other sorts of things. But streaming, talk radio, commentary, that sort of thing is the new the new podcasting. I noticed. I thought it was funny yesterday. You got the regime in full-on attack mode on Twitter, on X, going after Elon from every possible direction, and yet ABC was streaming it on Twitter. That's where I watched it. ABC News, the absolute hack partisans, are streaming on Twitter. It's undeniable. Elon's power levels are undeniable. They will continue to rise. But yeah, here's the. I'll show you guys real quick before we get into the substance of the show. Here's the 2 tweets that have taken off, and I'm telling you guys, if you want to be able to, if I'm gonna, I imagine what's going to happen. This is what's happened in the past. I imagine that eventually everything's going to dial back down again, and it's going to be crickets, as it usually is in my mentions. But until that happens, I can tell you, having gotten a little taste of this world, the only way that I will ever possibly be able to keep up with mentions while it's going on like this, if you want to reach me on Twitter, you've either got to DM me or get a blue check. Because I could filter down by mentions just from other people with the blue check. Only verified responses or interactions. I can filter by that. That's basically the only way I have to filter through the notifications. What's funny is, Duffhead, I'm going to show you the 2 tweets now that blew up. There's 2 of them that are going off right now. And what's funny is what's driving all of this is overwhelmingly, like 98% of the interactions are seething, raging libs. Now, in order to get to the point on Twitter where you can begin earning ad revenue on your tweets, you have to surpass the mark of 5 million interactions over the previous 3 months. Right now, I'm at like 3.5. This is the highest that I've gotten so far. And this includes JD Vance. The day JD Vance was announced, which was, to this point, I mentioned this the other day. I said I'm probably never going to get past that again. That was the most interactions that I've ever gotten, or most impressions that I've ever gotten in a day, which is the metric that matters. I had like 478,000 or something along those lines that day. Before I went live here, I've been going up at about 4 or 5 impressions per minute since I woke up this morning, and before then. And before just before I went live, I checked, and it was just passing 700,000 impressions for the day. And it's overwhelmingly driven by angry libs. And so many of them are like, oh, he's just engagement baiting to get his account monetized. And I'm like, you're damn right that's what I'm doing. And you're helping. Thank you. This is a great object lesson. It's a microcosm of the greater society. But the first one is this, and I had some stuff on this subject here. Very black pilling, very dark, very dark. But we're going to have to talk about it. I had to save some of this for probably tomorrow's show, along with some other things. But JD Vance, Elon Musk, a few different people have highlighted this story of an 11-year-old boy in Springfield who was riding the school bus a year ago. And a Haitian immigrant who was collected at the border, documented, and released into the country, driving illegally, slammed into the school bus, killed an 11-year-old boy, and injured 26 others. And yesterday, within 8 hours after Vance tweeted about it, within 8 hours, the boy's father came out and made a statement. And he said, I'm not going to play the statement for you guys right now, but he said that they wish that their son had been killed by an old white man instead of a Haitian, because then there wouldn't be racism. They did the Norm Macdonald tweet. And I saw this and was just, you got to steel yourself. This sort of thing isn't going to go away soon. There is great, great evil in this world. And you've got to be able to stomach it. Because that's not going away. The existence of great evil in the world is not at odds with us thriving and being prosperous and successful. Those things aren't at odds. Both of them can exist simultaneously. Both of them must exist simultaneously. And it doesn't do you any good to insulate yourself from the realization that evil is out there. In fact, it should be motivating to you. This is the purpose of suffering. Suffering is a mercy. It's a grace that's granted to us by God. Because when we experience that suffering, we see what it's like to be separate from Him. There is no life apart from Him. You'll experience death, and you'll look at you will stare it in the eyes. A lot of people I've talked to, Cooper is one of them, has told me that one of the big things that happened in the 2020 to 2021 timeframe was their realization that evil is very tangibly real. That realization coming online for them, demons are real. That realization coming online for them was what really moved them. This is the purpose. This is the left hand of God. For a time, the demons are permitted to enact all of their hate and envy and resentment of humanity to try to destroy us. We shouldn't remove ourselves from that suffering. We should recognize its purpose. So this father says, I said, if you hear a father say the words, quote, I wish, insert literally any noun, had killed my son, like devoid of context, that phrase, I wish blank had killed my son. One thing you can be certain of is that he's functioning as the mouthpiece of demons. I'm not saying he is a demon. Demons and humans are different for a reason, but he's functioning as their mouthpiece. There is no rationalization or justification or sympathetic explanation for why a father would ever find himself in the frame of mind where he would put together those words in a sentence. So this is the tweet, and it's at 221,000 right now. I mean, like, people getting millions of... How? How do you even use the app? And then here's the other one. The Onion. Fact check. Trump. People don't leave my rallies. True, they're carried out in body bags. Oh, it's a joke. That's not a joke. That's being delivered as a joke, but it's not a joke. You don't think of something like that as a joke. That doesn't come to your mind as a joke. That's fed to you by demons. Of course, they're taking shots at Corey Comparatori, the fireman and father who was so happy to go attend this rally, support his leader, and he caught a bullet. So this is the first thing that came to mind. When we win, don't forget that these people want you broke, dead, your kids raped and brainwashed, and they think it's funny. These are the stakes. This is what time it is. That one's at 3:37. I wonder what happens if I refresh since the time I opened it. All right, so about 10,000 impressions since then. Anyways, we'll get more into the Springfield stuff I think I'm probably on tomorrow's show. For now, after that dip into darkness, we're going to pull back out into the light. We need to frame this properly, okay? We need to start off on the right foot. And this is the right foot.
But he's highly respected. He is a great person. I've known him for so long. For the past 16 months, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
No. The creed isn't real. It was added after the fact. After the fact, he came out to "Hero" by the Foo Fighters, but it's real. What's real is what we decide is real. We get to make it real. More on that in a little bit. This one I posted this yesterday after watching some of the response that I was seeing from various people. And I'm very glad that Colin and Cooper worked to put this together, because we're going to be reposting it over and over and over. This, frame your mind. Frame your mind. Steal it against the marauding invaders. You got to chill out. You need to calm down. You need to focus and not be yanked one way or the other by each new news drop, because that's the purpose of the news drops. The purpose of the news drops are to demoralize and fracture the growing coalition on the right. That's the purpose of them. So when the regime does something to demoralize you, choosing to be demoralized by it is retarded. You can't then claim to be opposed to the regime because you're just functioning as its proxy. This is the way they recruit you, is by demoralizing you, by making you despair, because that's something they can work with. They can feed off of that energy like vampires. So stop fucking blackpilling. You got to. So more on this in a minute. That's a setup for what's coming here shortly. If you're following me on Twitter and you saw the thread I dropped this morning, you already read it. You know what's coming. But before that, a couple of random clips that were appropriate for the conversation here. I wanted to drop them in, actually, it's only one clip. No. There's two clips here. So I wanted to drop these in here so that we can discuss. So first one is Callie Means, who was on the much hyped Tucker interview with his sister Casey. If you guys haven't watched that, go watch it. I know there's a lot of content out there, but this one is a must watch, talking about the state of our medical system, the state of our agriculture. And here he is dropping truth bombs for one of the boomer whisperers.
Let me get this straight. You're saying that the major beverage companies, food companies, all of them, are bribing the scientists, bribing the regulatory agencies to endorse their formulas, their ingredients for food, to say that they're good, say that they're okay. And in fact, those ingredients are meant to addict people to the foods that they're selling.
The express purpose. I was shocked as a junior employee to see a list of names of professors from Harvard, from Tufts Nutrition School, from Stanford. And as a junior employee working for the food companies as a consultant, I steered money to those schools. The food industry funds nutrition research in this country 11 times more than the NIH. You are loath to find a nutrition researcher who's not directly paid with a direct consulting agreements bribes, and their research is predominantly funded by the food industry. I can tell you from working for this industry that that's not out of a philanthropic goodwill for unbiased research. The food industry is spending hundreds of millions of dollars on nutrition research to enhance their bottom line. It's to normalize these addictive foods.
Okay, so you say added sugar for 2-year-olds. So these cereals that they might eat that have all the cartoons on the front of them and that sort of thing, you're talking about the same mantra for a drug dealer.
Oh, a drug dealer. I can't overemphasize how significant it is that these kinds of conversations are happening. Dr. Phil is himself the one saying the people who are putting the cartoon cereals in your stores are drug dealers trying to poison you. This is the broader context of what's going on. All of the key narratives that have sustained the regime, their schemes, all of their organized crime syndicates are under full-scale assault from every angle. The normies are being awakened. Another clip talking about the death of the Boomer Truth regime. Colonel Macgregor, brave man, a good man, a man who deserves our support and our prayers.
Is that in process? Do you think there's a political revolution underway?
Yes, I do. The Germans, remember, have been on the national apology tour for 80 years, apologizing to everyone in sight for all the terrible, evil things they did and for, quote unquote, starting the Second World War. The truth is the Germans did not start the Second World War. Everything that happened in Germany was a reaction to communism, Bolshevism in Russia, the emergence of Stalin's Russia, and the fear of communism and the mass murder programs in the Soviet Union in the interwar years. The Germans, and they're not the only ones, virtually all the Europeans were horrified by it. But, this is the phony narrative that was created, that this happened exclusively in a vacuum, that Hitler woke up and decided to start a world war. No, he had help from somebody named Stalin. Without Stalin, there could not have been an invasion of Poland. Without Stalin, there could not have been an attack on the West. So that's all misleading and fundamentally wrong. The Germans need to put an end to the apology tour. Perhaps they will, because it's gotten them into this position they are now. They are now a nation living on the precipice of poverty and destruction.
That's such good messaging. Calling for the German spirit to assert itself. You guys don't need to live in this. I say you guys, I'm significantly German myself. Germans don't need to live in this humiliation, this perpetual humiliation ritual. The Germanic spirit is a great spirit. It's brought so many good things into the world. It's a beautiful spirit, and it deserves to thrive and not be subjected by this totalitarian schoolmarm ideology. Call them up. Bring them to the forefront. Make them rise again. We want to see a strong, powerful German spirit. Now, I know that you guys want the debate stuff, and we're going to get to the debate stuff. I've got a ton of debate stuff. I've also got JD Vance, some good JD Vance stuff related to the debate, and then his conversation with the All In podcast, which was fantastic. Which, again, is part of the context of everything that's happening here. But before we get to that, I don't know if anybody remembers, today is 9/11. This is from LSA Rifles on Twitter. Good morning. The word hero gets thrown around a lot these days, and it's fairly difficult to pinpoint what exactly it has come to mean in our modern context. My baseline for who or what a hero is always goes back to a conversation I had with my old man when I was younger, sitting on the bleachers above an empty soccer field. This is good writing. To him, a hero is someone, ordinary or otherwise, who acts without selfishness for the good of others, even if it imperils themselves. The thought of what's in it for themselves doesn't even come to mind. They just go and do. That conversation with my father came a little under 2 months before 9/11. When the dust settled, my old man's thoughts were validated. When stories of courage and selflessness beyond our comprehension started to rise out of the ashes. In the advance of tomorrow, the 23rd anniversary of 9/11, the following pictures in this thread all have a caption attached, each of them selected as a portrait of heroism. So here's the image. Eric Troelsen, a Danish businessman on a work trip to New York City, was stranded in the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel on his way to a meeting when the first plane hit the World Trade Center. Unaware of what was unfolding behind him in Manhattan, Troelsen saw a number of FDNY, New York Fire Department, firefighters running up the tunnel with the gear after their apparatuses got stuck behind traffic. He took a picture, this one specifically. 45 minutes later, this firefighter, 37-year-old Gary Box, husband and father of two, was killed during the first collapse. This was the last photograph ever taken of Gary. Adam McLam brought his Canon camera to work nearly every day since he bought it. On 9/11/01, Adam looked out of his Brooklyn workplace's windows to see the Twin Towers ablaze. Having grown up with dreams of becoming a firefighter, he waited for the local fire trucks to deploy from his borough across the bridge so he could grab a picture. It just so happened that he caught this one, Ladder 118, rushing towards the World Trade Center. Aboard Ladder 118 were Vernon Cherry, Leon Smith, Joey Agnello, Robert Reagan, Pete Vega, and Scott Davidson. The six made it to the Marriott Hotel in the towers and were an integral part of the effort that evacuated over 900 people successfully. When the towers came down, however, the six perished with them. All but one of their bodies were found together. This was the last known photograph ever taken of Ladder 118. There's the full image. A diehard Yankees fan, a history nut, husband, and father of one, Port Authority officer Christopher Amoroso was working his first day at the World Trade Center instead of the Port Authority bus terminal where he was usually assigned. When the towers were hit, he led as many people as he could to safety before running back into the South Tower to rescue more, despite a massive gash on his face and burns everywhere. He wouldn't make it out of the building during his third trip when the South Tower collapsed. This is the last photograph ever taken of Christopher. On 9/11, Cyril Rick Rescorla was Morgan Stanley's corporate security lead, working on the 44th floor of the South Tower. Ignoring shelter-in-place calls from the Port Authority, Rick began evacuating as many of the 2,700 Morgan Stanley employees as he could. The Port Authority is saying shelter-in-place inside the buildings that are about to collapse. This man ignores them and begins evacuating people. He kept morale high and fears low by singing Cornish songs and God Bless America through his bullhorn, just as he had done with his men during his years in Vietnam as a cavalry officer, where he was decorated for bravery under fire. Rick was responsible for saving thousands of lives that day before he rushed back into the South Tower to save more. Before the building collapsed, he was able to make one last call to his wife, saying, "Stop crying. I have to get these people out safely. If something should happen to me, I want you to know I've never been happier. You made my life." This is the last known photograph of Rick. His remains were never recovered. In closing, bad men need nothing more to compass their ends than that good men should look on and do nothing. John Stuart Mill. 9/11, let's roll. These are men. We need more. Here was Donald Trump's reaction that day.
The World Trade Center was always known as a very, very strong building. Don't forget, that took a big bomb in the basement. Now, the basement is the most vulnerable place because that's your foundation, and it withstood that. And I got to see that area about 3 or 4 days after it took place because one of my structural engineers actually took me for a tour because he did the building. And I said, I can't believe it. The building was standing solid, and half of the columns were blown out. I mean, so this was an unbelievably powerful building. If you know anything about structure, it was one of the first buildings that was built from the outside. The steel, the reason the World Trade Center had such narrow windows is that in between all the windows you had the steel on the outside. So you had the steel on the outside of the building. That's why when I first looked, and you had big, heavy I-beams, when I first looked at it, I couldn't believe it because there was a hole in the steel. And this is steel that was, you remember the width of the windows in the World Trade Center, folks. I think you know, if you were ever up there, they were quite narrow. And in between was this heavy steel. I said, how could a plane, even a 767 or 747 or whatever it might have been, how could it possibly go through the steel? I happen to think that they had not only a plane, but they had bombs that exploded almost simultaneously, because I just can't imagine anything being able to go through that wall. Most buildings are built with the steel is on the inside around the elevator shaft. This one was built from the outside, which is the strongest structure you can have. And it was almost just like a can of soup.
You know, Donald, we were looking at pictures all morning long of that plane coming into building number 2. And when you see that approach the far side, and then all of a sudden, within a matter of a millisecond, the explosion pops out the other side.
Right. I just think that it was a plane with more than just fuel. I think, obviously, they were very big planes. They were going very rapidly because I was also watching where the plane seemed to be not only going fast, it seemed to be coming down into the building. So it was getting the speed from going downhill, so to speak. It just seemed to me that to do that kind of destruction is even more than a big plane, because you're talking about taking out steel, the heaviest caliber steel that was used on a building. These buildings were rock solid, and you know, it's just an amazing thing. This country is different today.
This country is different today. I play these clips for you guys because this is the context. These are the stakes. This is what's happening. This is the broader story of what's going on. It's easy to get dug into each little story and begin losing yourself in this sort of digital world where significant events are just kind of fleeting and they disappear quickly into the past and we sort of forget about them. They don't have the impact on us that they should. A thread. I rewatched the debate late into the night. Shout out to Old Glory Club for their live stream. If you want to rewatch it, or if you haven't watched it yet, that's the way to do it. They had Bird from Timeline Earth there, Pete, Charlemagne, all the guys. It was so good. Trump's performance was even better than I realized in real time. So I'm sitting here, walking around the neighborhood last night, listening to this, and now I've got like the full context for what was going on, for the way it was going to go, and so I'm listening for specific things. and sort of running counterfactuals as I went through it. And I was like, okay, maybe watching live, I kind of got caught up in the hype and it was fun and there's some great zingers and everything, but let me listen for more of the structural aspects of the conversation. And it was even better than I realized. I kind of want to do like a full breakdown of it, but I also don't want to listen to Kamala. But some of it you kind of have to, because you have to understand what's happening here. I was blown away by just how good it was. Yet the response I saw on Twitter from large, ostensibly pro-Trump accounts is clear evidence why conservatives are a dying breed. They deserve to go the way of the dodo because they have no spirit, no will to fight for their people. Trump dominated the framing of the debate over and over again, forcibly returning the focus to the Biden-Harris incompetence and malevolence surrounding illegal immigration. Exactly what he needed to do in spite of, and especially because of, the ABC Hall Monitor's flagrant Kamala shilling. I lost track of the number of times that either, like as I was re-listening to it, I lost track of the number of times where either Pete or Charlemagne, especially, as a talking point would come up, they would say, this is what he needs to say. This is where he needs to pivot. Don't take the bait. Pivot back to this. And every single time he did it. It was almost like he was wearing some special microphone earrings with Charlemagne in one ear and Pete in the other. He landed every major punch of the night while debating 3v1, and yet so many large, ostensibly, pro-Trump accounts couldn't help themselves. They bemoaned his lack of discipline, complaining that he rambled too much, took the bait, said stuff that turns off normies, etc., etc., etc. Weak. They have no discipline. They can't help but reinforce regime propaganda because they are retarded. Normies don't have a takeaway from watching the debate. Their takeaway is determined by the net impact of the memes, TikToks, and rhetoric that emerges in the days or weeks after it. There is no objective analysis of the debate. People will believe what they are told to believe. Roughly quoting a great and esteemed wise man from the King Pill Discord, what actually happened doesn't matter. What the consensus makers say happened is what matters. What all of these large, ostensibly pro-Trump guys just can't grok is that they are opinion molders. They choose to be passive and reactive because they are soft and weak-willed and hopelessly devoted to the liberal myths of neutrality and impartiality. Pathetic. The man who literally took a bullet for our country just descended into a den of vipers and rhetorically battled for her soul. And you think it's time for measured, neutral takes because you're afraid of appearing too partisan? You're a cuck. You don't deserve your audience. This isn't a battle of facts and logic. The man who has volunteered to be our champion, and he's volunteered. He's had plenty of off-ramps he could take. At great personal cost, he continues to volunteer over and over again. The man who has volunteered to be our champion doesn't deserve this mealy-mouthed, fickle support. The immediate aftermath of the debate is the time for framing and attacking. Public opinion will follow accordingly. We must lead public opinion, not acquiesce to it. The debate already happened. Whatever galaxy-brained critiques you might have of his performance serve no purpose except to reinforce the regime narrative. Have even the vaguest sense of what time it is, I beg of you. We aren't neutral observers. We're all combatants in a battle for fickle hearts and minds, and our responsibility is to tell them what they saw. If we're telling them the same thing as our enemies, we're indistinguishable from them. You can't say that the legacy press is a bunch of controlled, intentional, relentless propaganda, and then directly or indirectly grant any sort of legitimacy to any of their narratives. You're just running cover for propaganda. The culture is moving toward us rapidly. Shout out to Stormy Waters, Charlemagne, P. Quinones, and Martyrmaid for their role in pointing this out and making this happen recently. Now is the time for pressing the advantage, championing the cause of our man, and bludgeoning the prearranged fake and gay narratives of the regime eunuchs, not succumbing to them. We don't have time for these buck-broken con-ink losers to keep stepping on every rake the regime lays out for them. The purpose of the narratives is to demoralize and undermine opposition to the regime, And choosing debate night to uncork very smart critiques of Trump is pathologically retarded self-ownage. Our greatest obstacle to restoring security, prosperity, and productivity to our nation isn't the regime or its direct apparatchiks. It's the loser mentality, fence-straddling, non-committal, disloyal conservatives who simultaneously over- and underestimate their own importance. Your very measured critiques mean nothing. And yet the fact that you're throwing your voice in support of these propaganda narratives means that you're reinforcing them. And you're leading the people who look up to you to interpret this stuff, to be the expert. You're leading them along the primrose path that the regime is laying out for their destruction. The events of the next approximately 4 months will be determined by willpower and focus. We're building an insurgent coalition using Trump as a battering ram to overwhelm a scattered, fracturing regime whose only hope of forestalling its own doom is sowing doubt and insecurity among us. If you're going to vote for Trump for fear of what the alternative will look like, then for fuck's sake, would you please grow some balls and leave behind the wishy-washy, cuckold conservatism of yesteryear? Rally behind our man and save the nerd shit for your diary. So here's the origin story. Trump is so anime. They invite him to this big fancy dinner just to make fun of him to his face. So he sits there in that haircut, coldly deciding to become the most powerful man in the world, and does.
And then, of course, there's Donald Trump. Donald Trump has been saying that he will run for president as a Republican, which is surprising since I just assumed he was running as a joke. Donald Trump often appears on Fox, which is ironic because a fox often appears on Donald Trump's head. If you're at the Washington Post table with Trump and you can't finish your entree, don't worry, the fox will eat it. Donald Trump owns the Miss USA pageant, which is great for Republicans because it will streamline their search for a vice president. Donald Trump said recently he has a great relationship with the blacks, though unless the blacks are a family of white people, I bet he's mistaken. I like that Trump is filthy rich, but nobody told his accent. His whole life is models and gold leaf and marble columns, but he still sounds like a know-it-all down at the OTB. Mr. Trump may not be a good choice for president, but he would definitely make a great press secretary. How much fun would that be? So it's not a strong field.
Oh, man. And this, of course, from Nightmare Vision, who, if I'm not mistaken, was retweeted by, was it JD Vance? Someone directly associated with the campaign just recently was signal boosting our boy. All right. Now, for the debate content. Did you guys notice, first off, that Kamala was standing at a little podium? This is just one of the little things, one of the many little things that that ABC did. It was Don Jr. Okay, Don Jr. It was one of the little things that they did to try to balance out the massive difference in presence here. She nuked it from the beginning when she comes out and she walked over to him. This is his gravity. She goes to him. He doesn't come to her. She goes to him. She goes and she shakes his hand and introduces herself. But they put her at a little podium. Oh, isn't it cute? They can't have any stools, but she's going to have a little podium. So it's not clear that she's a tiny, unimposing, silly woman. The other one, I thought I had this other tab open. Let me check real quick and see if I bookmarked it. If not, I would have to try to dig through my timeline, and that's not going to be worth it because it's going to take me way too long. But oh yeah, here it is. For my my scene setup people, video content people. Note the camera angles. So from his perspective, the camera is above him to the right, shooting down on him, making him look lesser, making him look lower. Meanwhile, hers is shooting from below and up to her, making her look like, you have the shot of the person standing up on the stage or sitting on top of a horse, looking regal. So from the beginning, they're subversively framing this. This is the narrative coming out, is how craven ABC is. Jack Posobiec tweeted that there's a rumor that that the Trump campaign is going to be freezing out ABC, which is good. Yeah, why not the Willie Brown angle? And someone else astutely pointed out that this isn't the first time that he's been shot from up and to the right. And I wonder how much of that was intentional. So the first clip here. This may be the most egregious example of ABC debate moderators' direct actions or inactions to affect viewers' perceptions of the information presented at the debate. Now, there's a lot of people who are saying, oh, he shouldn't have taken the debate. Of course, this is what was going to happen. No. There was no not taking the debate. It was just, you're handing a very easy narrative to them. Rather, you take the debate and you allow them to do all of their stuff. Because you know what happens? Every single time that Trump appears in one of these settings where even the ostensibly neutral, impartisan people are going after him, when everyone is aligned against him, it makes him look better. His power levels rise every single time something like this happens. So yes, go do the debate. Now he shouldn't do the other one. Shouldn't do another one. There's no reason. She immediately calls for one right after it's done. She says, oh, it was great. I'm ready for another one. If you win a debate, you don't ask for another one. Just projecting insecurity. No, there's no point. Let JD Vance go out and absolutely wipe the floor with Tim Walz and call it a day. But he had to do the debate. Because him doing the debate allows for this narrative to form. I'll play the clip and then we'll go through his descriptions.
Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi, but I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say, we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate,
they're just letting her go.
In this election, there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
One answer, one single answer that starts with this smarmy little queer fact-checking him and throwing it immediately to her to let it, to run with it. They're not even hiding it. They're not even attempting to. It's so transparent. He says there are at least 7 instances of this within a 2-minute span of the moderator's direct actions and inactions to affect viewers' perceptions of the information presented at the debate. This is not bias. It's much worse. This is direct, planned interference in the debate outcome. When moderators take on the role of fact checkers, the inference is that the absence of a fact check confers validity to the non-fact checked information. When one side is repeatedly fact checked, while the other is not, that is a signal to the viewer that one side is not reliable and truthful while the other side is. The ABC moderators had their orders, and here you see those orders executed. In this clip, it's all in one clip, 1 2-minute clip. First, Trump says Pelosi is responsible for security at the Capitol. True. Muir intervenes on Kamala's behalf by cutting him off with a snarky retort, doesn't acknowledge the validity of Trump's statement, and immediately redirects to Kamala to set up her answer he knows is coming. This is direct action by Muir to affect the outcome of this exchange. The question is, why didn't you do more? He says, I did what I could. This was her responsibility. So I asked you about her, you, not her. Kamala, please weigh in. Number 2, Kamala says she was at the Capitol on J6. She was there in the morning, but left to go to DNC HQ prior to the riot. Critical information is omitted. No fact check. Kamala 3. Kamala says Trump incited a mob to attack the Capitol. False. Trump's peacefully and patriotically comments are ignored. Trump is not charged with inciting violence. No fact check. And of course, this was his response when they tried to bait him into this. Number 4, Kamala says that some police officers died on January 6th. False. No fact check. Number 5, Kamala recites the Charlottesville fine people hoax. This has been thoroughly and repeatedly debunked. No fact check. This has been debunked on regime media. Number 6, Kamala recites the stand back and stand by hoax. This is designed to infer that Trump was ordering a militia to act on later orders when he was clearly asking for a cooling of tensions. No fact check.
Nancy Pelosi.
Number 7, Kamala recites the bloodbath hoax. Trump was talking about the automobile industry, not violence. No fact check. To quote Megyn Kelly on the ABC moderators, they did exactly what their bosses wanted. Now here's the subtext to this. All of this stuff is easily debunked, widely debunked. This is red meat to the response from Trump's campaign, which has been dominating the news, driving the narrative constantly. Just gave them oodles of material to use to attack from all angles. That's the purpose of the debate, is not for the actual debate itself, but the attack angles that it creates, the pretexts for narrative crafting that happen after the fact. Of course it's biased. But the narrative is not, oh, the media is biased. The narrative is that because the media is biased, and because she has nothing except for these easily debunked litany of lazy lies, there's nothing else for her to use. She practices for weeks and weeks, and this is all the material that they have. By framing the media and her as the dominant pair, oh, they're the ones that were able to bait him in, and then they executed this attack on him. You're making them look better. You're framing them as dominant when they're not. They're reactive. They're lashing out. They're trying to corner him. This is not confident behavior. This is desperate behavior. And people could smell that. They can sense it. But they're going to be subjected to a wave of propaganda. Absolutely enormous. Easily predictable. This is them trying to wrestle control of the narrative again and bring it back. They've been reactive for so long. They're trying to end run around some of these issues and grab control of things again. They're not on the attack, they're on the defensive. But if you frame their defense as attack, you deceive people who will be subject to an overwhelming amount of propaganda indicating that they're the ones who are on the ascendancy. Implicitly endorsing that contributes to the propaganda. Meanwhile, Trump gave months worth of responses, of easily memeable, massive responses that resonate with people. Those are the things to be highlighted. In particular was this one. Trump tells the story of how he gave the Taliban leader a satellite photo of his own home. We've talked about this on the show before. I played the clip that he mashes up with Trump's quote just to give some context to you. This is some killer stuff. This is absolute badassery. No man can hear this and get squeamish, except for, I guess, the NPR hosts, the ones that, the 144 T levels. This appeals to every red-blooded man out there.
He said, "Why do you send me a picture of my house?" I said, "You're going to have to figure that out, Abdul." And for 18 months, we had nobody killed.
Abdul was trending #1 on Twitter for a couple of hours yesterday. That's how impactful this little story was. And the talking heads, the ostensibly pro-Trump talking heads, could lean into that and press the advantage, or they could just ignore it and be like, "Oh, well, you see, he actually, when this thing happened, he said that, and he should have said this thing, and so because he did, he gave her an opportunity." Shut the fuck up! Make Abdul memes! Be useful!
My favorite President Trump story. This is my #1 favorite of all time. When we were negotiating with the Taliban while President Trump was still the president, President Trump wanted to get out of Afghanistan, but he wanted a conditions-based withdrawal. Meaning that you do what we tell you to do, and then we will start pulling troops back slowly as long as you abide by our rules. It's President Trump and Mike Pompeo, and they are talking to Taliban leadership in the room, and they had one translator in the room. President Trump looked at the Taliban leader and said this: "I want to leave Afghanistan, but it's going to be a conditions-based withdrawal." And translator translated. And he said, "If you harm a hair on a single American, I'm going to kill you." And the translator goes, and Trump goes, "Tell him that."
Yes.
Tell him what I said. Reached in his pocket, pulled out a satellite photo of the leader of the Taliban's home and handed it to him.
Shut up.
Got up and walked out the room. Do you know for 18 months not a single American was killed in Afghanistan? That's the definition of strength. That's what I'm talking about. And so you can imagine that kind of sentiment being around the world. If we have an embassy in another country, no one's going to touch it because they're going to be fearful that they're going to get a Moab on their head. That's how President Trump rolls.
This is the narrative. This one single clip means more than an endless stream of prattling on about economic policy and blah, 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 blah. This right here. This is just one of many bangers that he dropped. After the show today, Drunk Plater says, "I need to bookmark this one." After the show today, I will tweet out the master thread of all of these clips that I've gone into today. I'll include all of them. I'll tweet it out at Real King Pilled. You can go get them yourself. Spread them far and wide. This is what a man leads. This is how a man leads. This is how a leader of men leads. The commander-in-chief of the military. Oh, I forgot about this one. Of all the Trump memes to be vaguely prophetic, how the fuck is this now one of them? The man of destiny.
Know exactly what you look like and where you live.
Well, I use a VPN, so...
That is SoCap, Junior. I just pulled your IP. I've got it right now.
No, you don't. Huh. Say
Albuquerque, New Mexico. Albuquerque, New Mexico. That's where you're from.
That's not. How did. Hey!
Oh, I just pulled your IP. 308 Negra Aurora Lane, Albuquerque, New Mexico. That's you, isn't it?
No.
I'm on Google Earth right now. I see a peep sign in your room.
That's my grandma's house. Nice try.
No, what? So you're playing at your grandmother's house? You're a loser. Don't even joke to me. You're a loser. Playing at grandma's. What is she gonna make you a cookie? Know what exactly?
Andrew says 2 polls came out today from New York Times and Reuters saying that the undecided voters are breaking 2-1 against Kamala after the debate. Seems like rigging the debate didn't work out for her, violated Normie's sense of fairness. There you go. There's another narrative. Because, you know, that narrative starts spinning up. And here's the thing about memeing a narrative into reality. There's a bunch of kind of wishy-washy normies out there who just kind of vaguely hold on to whatever they heard last. And if they hear this narrative that, oh man, normies didn't like the way that the debate was rigged. Oh, the debate was rigged? How was the debate rigged? What are you talking about? Oh, that's not fair. Other people think that's not fair. Yeah, that's not fair. This is how the overwhelming majority of people think. Our job is to lead them. It's not be objective and impartial and neutral and seriously weigh this side versus that side as if they're legitimately equivalents. You don't implicitly recognize their legitimacy or authenticity or strength. This takes discipline. And you've got to have an IQ above lukewarm to pick up on this stuff. This is why we don't have patronage networks, because there's no fucking loyalty. These upstanding, noble conservatives will just backstab anybody advocating for their interests for the sake of being impartial and neutral. I'm going to give you an objective look at this because I'm a free and independent thinker who's not beholden to any narratives. That's why patronage networks collapse. It's like narrative anarchy. No, there is a narrative that you are beholden to. You have an obligation to be beholden to that narrative. Because you are a lesser man than the men who seek to lead you. Who are willing to advocate for your values, no matter how much you spit on them. This might be his greatest takedown yet.
And policies like they have, I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy, but
even she
laughs. If she
laughs.
got elected, she'd change it, and it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you...
Every man looking at this has seen that look before and felt indescribable things welling up inside him that he's had to restrain. No man looks at this and is like, oh, yeah.
You look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have...
He needs to be on the attack. Don't take the bait. At literally every opportunity that he had, he brought it back to immigration. And he pulled no punches. These are criminals. They've been brought in here intentionally. Her and her boss are the ones who are subverting our country, attacking it from every angle. Importing criminals intentionally to attack our communities. How is this not the perfect narrative construction. This is maintaining the frame, no matter what. They're talking about the economy. He's like, yeah, economy? How about these immigrants? How about their effect on our economy? She brings up January 6th. He's like, what about all these immigrants being brought in here? All these criminals, all these gangsters? When are they going to be arrested? When are the people who burned down Minnesota going to be arrested? When are the people who took out a neighborhood in Seattle, when are they going to be arrested? All of these people who are attacking Americans, when are they going to be arrested? This is fantastic framing.
And she has destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump.
This was one of the best clips of the night. Shout out to Neo Americana on Twitter. Curtis LeMay did nothing wrong. I'm going to read a thread from him here in a little bit because he's had some really good takes on this. He says, this is a great clip. People tell you his debate performance was bad and he didn't talk about the border. Just smash this one into a quote at them. The only way someone could possibly conceive that he didn't talk about the border or he didn't stay on point or he didn't hold the frame. If you watched the debate and that was your takeaway, I'm telling you right now, you are passively regurgitating something that has been seeded into you from the regime eunuchs. Because it's just simply not true.
They have the right to do it. The President of the United States, you'll get him out of bed, you'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you'll say, come on down to the office, let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed. They have the right to
drag him out of bed, take him down right now, and close the border. You can. Quit punting to Congress. Go close the border. The fact that you won't go close the border right now is all that anyone needs to know. He just pinned her to the wall over and over and over again. That is the narrative. Share these clips far and wide. Now, one of the best quotes of the night. Everyone erupted when this happened. I mean, think about the effect when he says, I was going to give her a MAGA hat. Imagine if there'd been an audience there. That's why there's not an audience, because of things like this. He's going to pull these zingers out organically, naturally. He's not running through rehearsed statements as she obviously is. He just pulls these zingers out of his back pocket. I was going to send her a MAGA hat because she's taking all of my policies. The audience would have roared. Even she genuinely laughed at it because it was funny. One of the narratives is how he's old, he's tired, he's low energy. And here he is getting fired up because he is genuinely pissed about this stuff. He's angry. He's angry at their incompetence, at their malevolence, at the sheer gall of their lies. He's angry on your behalf. And you have the fucking temerity to be, he doesn't restrain himself. He's just a grumpy old man. You deserve to lose. A key point missing in a lot of post-debate analysis is that Trump's claim about immigrants eating pets almost perfectly syncs up to the piano in the Peanuts theme song.
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
Whoever figured this out, like whoever was sitting here listening to it and was like, hey, that's like the Peanuts song. We need to take them and we need to study their brain for science. I can't wrap my mind around the mind that would think of that. I was too busy in absolute awe at our president. He said it. They're eating the dogs. This is a narrative that began a couple of days ago with us. Our corner of the internet, in the space of a couple of days, laid the groundwork for the most memeable thing that came out of a presidential debate, that came out of the mouth of our president. How can you be black-pilled? Relatedly, we need to be protecting our very good boys. Vote Trump to protect the very good boys, because look at this. Look at the effect that these enemies of all creation are having on our pets.
My dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
but
television.
The people
I'm
on
taking it from
television
the city
saying
manager.
their dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice
We'll
President
find
Harris,
out.
I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme.
My dog was
Talk
taken.
about extreme. It was just like ears were bleeding last night because as she talks, as she just goes on and on and on, her voice gets higher and higher and higher and higher. She gets shriller and shriller. There's no one who enjoyed listening to that. The crazy cat ladies are like, ha ha, our queen. But nobody found that pleasant. Physiologically, listening to her talk stressed people out. Even if they convinced themselves they liked the words coming out of her mouth, it stressed her out. If you understand people, you can capitalize on that. If you're not an autistic moron. I want to see if this has been fact-checked yet, because it's nope, no community note yet. Because this is not actually what was on the TV. I've seen this clip before. It's I want to say it was Star Wars, and I think the dog is reacting to Darth Vader. That's the source of the clip. But this is such good memeing. Such good memeing. All right, so here's the thread from Neo Americana. He says, after the 2016 debate, the immediate consensus was that Hillary won. She looked presidential and Trump was a disgrace. The polls reflected this also. Look it up. Cash Nicholson says, I think it's basically a wash. No one will remember it in a few days. Kamala missed an opportunity to catch up and Trump maintained his lead. And he said a wash would be a Kamala win, basically, because it can be spun. I think with spin, we'll see a slight bump for Kamala, but I doubt it will last long and the memes will endure. He says, as we learned in 2016, the meme magic is important. And debates like this in the current year are primarily fuel for clips and memes. Trump got more clips, which will all get shared over and over for the next 2 months. And any of these big posters who have been around for years, they've been immersed in this world for so long. If they don't understand this at this point, I don't think there's any hope for them. People talking about normies being glued to televisions and being convinced by Kamala's lies, I think, are missing the fact that a lot of normies are going to get this debate via TikTok clips over the next week. Which, this interim period is when we can continue this pattern of us being the ones who set this narrative. Who forced the Blue Anon people, the Kamala campaign, all of these millennial shit libs to be constantly having to react and debunk. There still seems to be this idea that normies binge watch CNN or something. They do not. They watch TikTok. Their coworkers force them to watch TikToks. Trump will ultimately get more mileage out of this than Kamala because she'll get at best a clip or two. Take, for example, the Obamacare segment. Trump genuinely does awful there, but Kamala fails to pick it up and run with it. So there's no Kamala clip for the Kamala people to force their coworkers to watch, and Trump guys aren't going to be whipping out their phones to show their coworkers that either, so it's a totally irrelevant moment. This is why the, very smart critiques are so stupid. The very smart critique thing that you're applying doesn't matter, except for you saying it matters. Kamala people will clip the tear she went on abortion and probably a couple other better sounding snippets. Trump has probably 10 certified meme magic moments, maybe more. So NBC will assure us Kamala won 50-40. She'll pick up a point or two for a week, and that's it for her. Again, don't get yanked around by all of the news drops. Maintain the frame yourself. All of these guys who are like, oh, he's not maintaining the frame. They're not maintaining the frame. He's doing just fine. Another reaction thread. Vagrant of Rhodes. He's a regular. He's showing up here all the time now because he's posting certified bangers. Debate analysis. This isn't 2016 anymore. People don't form political opinions the same ways in which they used to. Normal people will see this media hit job, and that will stand out more than either debate performance by the candidates. Television as an entity is a known joke, a holdover from the boomers' golden telecoms empire, and its court jesters like David Muir are now mostly jeered at rather than taken seriously, no matter how dour and self-important he pretends to be, fluffing out his little skinny tie like a Tom Brokaw wannabe, guarding the poor hapless VP like the dog that he is. This type of opinion controlled by TV, once formidable, matters less and less by the day. We are transitioning into a new paradigm in the public's pattern recognition capabilities, evolving beyond the old command and control systems like pre-planned TV debates. The regime is trying to use the same old playbook in the hopes they'll be able to dupe enough of the people who haven't developed this new skill enough yet. Boomers, Gen X cultural strivers, unmarried millennial women, and resentful societal subgroups who reliably fall for the old tricks of the trade for various reasons. But 8 years of constant chaos, psyops, decline, and broken trust is a long time. The cost of their desperation to rid themselves of Trump, COVID, the stolen election, and every misery of the last 4 years of Biden-Harris has been immense on this front. They've spent all goodwill and strained all credulity. They've fired all missiles, literally, even trying to kill Trump in a botched assassination. All of this means that there are a lot more people who see through these tactics for what they are via alternative media and a now well-trained sense of pattern recognition. The end result is that the debates almost cease to mean anything and merely end up confirming things we know. Harris is a valid idiot, the media and system are working to install her by fiat, and Trump is a man on a wire under assault from all sides trying to save this country. That's it, in a sentence. That is the only narrative that matters. The only meta-narrative. If you're posting about things like oh, it was, of course it was rigged, Trump shouldn't have taken the bait. Even, let's say that was true. Let's say it was true. Remember the patronage thread that I wrote the other day that I read the other day about the film director, the visionary luminary or whatever he was, who his own pride and ego made him dig in, got himself fired, and all of his minions below him out of a job. And the guy who wrote the thread said the proper patron-client relationship here would have been for him to cover for his boss when his boss made a mistake. So let's grant the premise that it was a mistake to take the debate. If you're someone who's going to vote for Trump because you can't stomach what the alternative would be, then your responsibility is not to say, hey, you dummy, you made a mistake. Your responsibility is to frame that, especially if you have a large audience and a lot of people listening to you, but even individuals talking to your family members and your friends and your coworkers. Your responsibility is to frame that into how it was a hit job. That's the reason he's doing it. You have to play the game up to a point, because by playing the game, you can reveal that the game is rigged. And the more that Trump reveals the game is rigged, the more his popularity grows, the greater his mandate becomes. This is what loyalty is. It isn't like slavish, blind devotion. It's a conscious effort to repay the great risks that your leaders take for you. Of course, I reject the premise outright that it was a mistake to take the debate. I think he had to take the debate. It was good that he took the debate because it sets up this conversation. It sets up this opportunity for memes, for posting, for videos, all the stuff that controls the public square today. If he doesn't take the debate, we don't have all these opportunities. But we have to be intelligent enough to recognize how this works. That there's nothing to be gained by saying, oh, it was a mistake, you shouldn't have done it. If you do believe that, which is stupid. I think it's stupid to believe that. But if you do believe that, you have to see it for the cell phone that it is, to publicly prattle on about that. If this was 2016, we would want more substance and policy talk, but now it's as if that stuff is secondary anyway. The candidates each have an energy, a feel, a vibe, and it's easy to decide based on that alone. Harris is the vibe of compliance and blissful ignorance, accepting decline and selling the future for temporary comforts and pride. She is lies and systems, institutions, and status quo. Same old, same old. We aren't going back means they never want mankind to be great or daring ever again. A soft, effeminate, and pointless future devoid of risk and true meaning or real emotions. Harris wants you doped up and screened up, never looking at the world crumbling around you, a dumb animal in a pile of fluffy nothingness. Trump is the vibe of hope and effort, the Faustian struggle against man's lazy and sinful nature to build and never accept mediocrity. Trump is hard work and discomfort in the efforts to build a better future. He wants you to get up and do something, to be willing to sacrifice now for your children's future, to acknowledge failures and work to fix them. His road is hard but meaningful, filled with risks and lacking in softness, but rewarding you with true feeling and purpose. You learnt these things through pattern recognition, which is best done with newer technology. Neither side needs a TV debate to tell them these things anymore, and besides, it isn't capable of doing so. Our second Dr. Phil clip of the day.
Was there bias by the moderators today, in y'all's opinion?
Let's just look at body language. Look at the facial expressions of people when they're looking at Trump. There was clearly a bias against Trump in their faces. Let's take my other opinion. This is all my opinion. There's a little bit of a thumb on the scale when you ask one person 2 questions in a row as the primary question, and it's a softball question. That feels like bias to me. I would challenge them to tell me why that's not bias if I were in his situation.
At the same time, we're seeing the commentators, they would be speaking at the same time President Trump was. So as he's trying to finish his answer, they would not only answer, they would keep talking as well. And you can tell, and I believe, if I'm correct here, the volume of his microphone might have been a little bit hotter than everybody else's. That's why he sounded so loud. He was speaking loudly. But I think you'll hear this when you listen back and forth. This is my opinion.
Well, let me remind everybody that Scott's a Grammy-nominated music producer, so he knows a little bit about sound.
So I pay attention to that stuff a little bit. So he sounded a little bit louder to me. So that whether that was on purpose to make him sound more aggressive, I don't know. But he was pretty loud in there.
Here were the questions until I had to walk over here. When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago? Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs? To Trump, why should women trust you on the issue of abortion? To Harris, why did the Biden administration wait until 6 months before the election to take action on immigration? To Trump, how would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? To Harris, why have so many of your policy positions changed? Fracking, assault rifles, the border. To Trump, is there anything you regret about what you did on January 6th?
Is there anything you regret about what you did on January 6th? These weasels.
Do you acknowledge that you lost the 2020 election? And in each of these questions to Trump, there were fact-check follow-up questions, and I didn't hear that to Harris.
Nor did I, and there's a way you ask a question. I interrogated people for a long time, and when you're doing that, you want to look at, how do I ask the question? Why didn't you say, why have you not done anything about the border, as opposed to Trump, didn't you? There's a more negative tone often towards Trump. At the end of the day, this is about finding out what they think and giving everybody a chance to understand it, and I thought it was a little heavy-handed at times, just my opinion.
This is the normie boomer content. This is what they're talking about. Now, someone who I have been following for a little while now, and to some comments I heard yesterday, I realized that maybe you guys haven't been tracking with Megyn Kelly's redemption arc. I've listened to most of her shows over the past few weeks, and she's a huge fan of RFK, or RFKJ, as she says. And she's been very, very exercised about him coming on board with Trump. But this is a very, very good for the women's out there, the women's who are listening to their podcasts and such. If they're going to be listening to podcasts, this is a very, very good one for her. She's getting real crunchy. She's all in on Trump, completely torqued about the state of the media that she came out of. And she's very honest, very sincere. She's been talking to a lot of our guys. She's someone to keep an eye on. She's doing a lot. I think her redemption arc has been undercovered. This was her response. If you were following her on Twitter, she was pissed yesterday during the debate. And then this is her response afterwards. And you'll see she's pretty pissed.
Well, I watched it. Did you watch it? I'm disgusted. I'm ashamed of those moderators at ABC News. They did exactly what their bosses wanted them to do. The person who runs ABC News is a close personal friend of Kamala Harris, that is responsible for Kamala Harris and her husband meeting. And they did Dana Walden's bidding tonight. It was 3-1 on that debate stage this evening. Hi, everyone. I'm Megyn Kelly, a special program tonight for you reacting to the debate. It was 3-1. It's very easy to look like you know what you're doing when both moderators are entirely on your side. Trump did the best he could under the circumstances, but it really was like three fighters in the ring pummeling one opponent. And Trump tried to take them all on. He did fine. He did as best as he could. He was thrown a few times to the point where he was unnecessarily defensive and he was getting angry. And so was I. Were you? This was a mistake to trust ABC News with this debate. The Republicans must learn from this mistake. The same way the Democrats never agree to do anything with moderators they don't entirely trust. This should be the last time the Republicans ever do this. Because those two moderators tried to sink Donald Trump tonight. The numerous fact checks on what he said and none on what she said. None. I don't remember a single fact check of anything she said, and she lied repeatedly. She just got away with it. In the moderator's eyes, that was Donald Trump's job to fact check her. That's correct. Except you didn't employ that same tactic when it came to Trump. And you accused him of lying even when it was your opinion that he lied. When Trump tried to say that his comment that he lost 2020 by a whisker was him being sarcastic, David Muir actually injected saying, I didn't hear sarcasm. Who gives a shit what you heard? Who died and left you political analyst in chief? You're supposed to be the objective news anchor of World News Tonight. That's a comment you make to your significant other, David. Not on the debate. It didn't sound like that to me. Shut up. That is inappropriate. It's not for you to make that call. Leave it up to Kamala Harris. Leave it up to people like me who will play this soundbite and let the audience decide. But you were out of line, and they did it to him over and over and over again. And the worst piece of all of this is the obvious tactic by ABC News, which was as follows. Mr. Trump, you said something incredibly controversial and terrible. Let me remind you of what it was. Do you have any regrets or thoughts on how terrible you were? Trump answers. Vice President Harris, how bad is Trump? And then she'd answer. It happened over and over again. That was the format. Mr. Trump, you're a piece of shit. Kamala Harris, isn't he a shit? Thank you. It was incredible. And then anything Trump said, fact check, fact check, fact check. And their fact checks were full of shit. I'm swearing even more than normal right now because I'm mad. I'm angry. I'm angry at them, at ABC, at my industry that I want nothing to do with. And I've never been happier to be outside and be able to say how I truly feel. And yes, even with some colorful words, because that's what the situation calls for. They're trying to steal this election. They're openly working to sink him.
I'm glad you guys, reading the chat here, I'm glad you guys enjoyed that as much as I did. She just had an episode where she talked to Naval Ravikant, which was very interesting. And it was funny because she was like, Ryan Isaac mentioned when she said, where was it? Her redemption started when she said, some man fix this. She said, I want Steve Bannon back. Someone fix this shit. And then she's talking to Naval, and I remember what he said, but she responded, and she was like, yeah, let's destroy him. And he was like, oh, well, you see, that's the consequence of this, is that it gets this vengefulness rising among people. And she's like, hell yeah. And then she had another guy on, Johns Hopkins, guy named Dr. Makari on, talking about the rank corruption and misinformation and everything coming out of big pharma and agriculture and all the government corruption and everything associated with it. She's very much on a crunchy arc. Talked about pregnancy and the danger of C-sections and all kinds of stuff. I was like, wow, she has been following her Instagram crunchy moms. D. Allman says, boomer men love this gal. Yes, she absolutely does. They absolutely do. All right. I'm actually getting through this faster than I expected. So we're getting to the JD Vance stuff, and maybe I'll actually be able to play a little bit more of the All In podcast than I planned. To everybody who was complaining to me, caterwauling away about JD Vance when Trump picked him, I'm awaiting your mea culpas. You're welcome to submit them to me however you please. You can go to realkingpill@gmail.com. You can DM me on Twitter @realkingpill. You can join the Kingpill Discord at kingpill.com and tell me there. I will accept your mea culpas because I'm gracious and magnanimous. I got a couple clips from him here. A tweet from him yesterday that I can't believe I didn't see before the show yesterday. And then the conversation with him on the All In podcast. This is the first one. JD Vance is demolishing the media in the spin room.
You said that's why I was seeking clarification. But let me ask you about this for just very quickly. I heard Donald Trump before this debate describe Kamala Harris as, I'll just read a few of them, a low IQ individual, somebody who doesn't have the mental capacity to be president, really dumb, unable to put two sentences together. Is that what you saw on the stage tonight?
John, what I saw was a lot of slogans. I think the American people are smart, and Kamala Harris talks to them like they're children. She repeats these ridiculous platitudes where if you actually think about what she said, you realize that it doesn't make any sense. She talks a lot about her plans, but then her plans, when you analyze the substance, don't make any sense. And more importantly, John, the American people don't get fed on plans. She has been the vice president for 3.5 years. What she can't do, refuses to do, and has no ability to do is to say, I accomplished lower prices because she didn't, or I accomplished lower housing prices because she didn't, or I secured the southern border because she didn't do that. She has failed as vice president, and the fundamental question is, do we want to give her a promotion? I think the answer has to be no, John.
This is not taking the debate and reestablishing the frame on the things that matter. This is even better. Let's see. Do I want to do this one first? Do I want to do this one or this one? Yeah, let's do this one first. We're going to do the video. Yeah, I'm just going to share it and play it.
I would say is he brought up this misleading false claim that you yourself have talked about in recent days about Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, abducting people's pets and eating them, which officials there have said is not true. You yourself acknowledged it may be false on Twitter. You still told people to keep spreading it. But Trump just amplified it to tens of millions of people who were watching. Why push something that's not true?
Well, first of all, city officials have not said it's not true. They've said they don't have all the evidence.
They said they have no evidence.
We've heard from a number of constituents on the ground, Caitlin, who both firsthand and secondhand reports saying this stuff is happening. So they very clearly, meaning the people on the ground dealing with this, think that it is happening. And I think that it's important for journalists to actually get on the ground and uncover this stuff for themselves when you have a lot of people saying, my pets are being abducted, or geese at the city pond are being abducted and slaughtered right in front of us. This is crazy stuff. And again, whether those exact rumors turn out to be mostly true, somewhat true, whatever the case may be, Caitlin, this town has been ravaged by 20,000 migrants coming in. Healthcare costs are up. Housing costs are up. Communicable diseases like HIV and TB have skyrocketed in this small Ohio town. This is what Kamala Harris's border policies have done. And I think it's interesting, Caitlin, that the media didn't care about the carnage wrought by these policies until we turned it into a meme about cats. And that speaks to the media's failure to care about what's going on in these communities. If we have to meme about it to get the media to care, we're going to keep on doing it because the media should care about what's going on.
I saw you say,
one of us, one of us, one of us. This is the meme magic. This is how it works. And now the frickin' vice president is openly acknowledging it. This is how we set the terms of the narrative. We are the elites. They're working with us. They are happy to accept our efforts and to magnify them, to amplify them. This is the effect of Elon Musk taking over X. And who funded that? Who paid for that? Go listen to Stormy Waters on the 2-Bit podcast, dropping tonight. All of this here, all this back and forth, all this narrative stuff, it matters. It's very important. But it's not important for the purposes of winning the election. It's important for the purposes of what comes next. setting the narrative, the terms of the debate, and the trajectory of the country afterwards. Having a full awareness of what the problems are now and what must be done to resolve them. We can control the narrative if we are wise. And the presumptive favorites for president are openly cooperating with us, signaling to us, explaining exactly what's happening on CNN. Oh man. The cat clips, the duck memes, all of this stuff going viral induces the response of debunking. Oh, no. All those Haitian migrants in Ohio, they're not actually the ones eating the cats. Oh, this picture here was from Columbus. The subtext is, hold on, wait a second. All these Haitians in Ohio, why are there Haitians in Ohio? We're going to get into that more tomorrow. I didn't have time to fit it all in today. I guess maybe I would have, but probably doesn't hurt to have a slightly shorter show for once. It'll leave you guys time to listen to some of these other things I've been telling you about. This is the purpose of the memes. By memeing it into the campaign and the campaign amplifying it, it forces the regime to respond to it. And by responding to it, they're forced to amplify and embrace the subtext of it. And that's how you get the, whatever, I can't remember what it's called, the such and such parallax. Where it goes from, this isn't happening, to it's happening and it's good. That's how you get this narrative into the news, because they can't help it. They have to react to us now. This is what he tweeted yesterday. In the last several weeks, my office, this is JD Vance. In the last several weeks, my office has received many inquiries from actual residents of Springfield. Remember, he's still a senator in Ohio, who've said their neighbors' pets or local wildlife were abducted by Haitian migrants. It's possible, of course, that all of these rumors will turn out to be false. Do you know what's confirmed? Here's the pivot. This is the establishment of the frame. Do you know what's confirmed? That a child was murdered by a Haitian migrant who had no right to be here. That local health services have been overwhelmed. That communicable diseases like TB and HIV have been on the rise. That local schools have struggled to keep up with newcomers who don't know English. That rents have risen so fast that many Springfield families can't afford to put a roof over their head. Here's Kamala Harris bragging about giving amnesty to thousands of Haitian migrants. I've played this clip before. I'm not gonna subject you guys to that. If you're a reporter or an activist who didn't give a shit about these suffering Americans until yesterday, I have some advice. Spare your outrage for your fellow citizens suffering under Kamala Harris's policies. Be outraged at yourself for letting this happen. 14.7 million views. And wait for this. The follow-up. In short, don't let the crybabies in the media dissuade you, fellow patriots. Keep the cat memes flowing. My vice president needs me. I'm going to make some more cat memes. Notice who this tweet is directed at. This was directed to reporters and activists who didn't give a shit about these suffering Americans until yesterday. This one's directed at us. Don't let the crybabies in the media dissuade you, fellow patriots. Keep the cat memes flowing. Ah! Don't doubt me. Here we go. The All In podcast. This was such a good conversation. I sat down yesterday. One of my favorite ways now to consume all this stuff. I've got so many podcasts and stuff. People send me clips, everything that I need to go through. Now I'm taking a couple of hours every day, and I sit down. I pull up the Master Chief Collection, open up some Halo 3 matchmaking, throw on the headphones, and I sit here and I listen to this stuff while I'm playing. And I could hardly focus on what I was doing yesterday listening to this conversation, because it's just, he's more charismatic and well-spoken and quick on his feet than even I appreciated before. JD Vance is an absolute Chad. He's subtle with it, but he is good. We're going to listen to it's probably going to come out to being almost half of this conversation because it's worth it. But same guys we listened to yesterday with Elon Musk. Now the same event. They're talking to JD Vance in front of a crowd of, and I need to pull this down here, in front of a crowd of essentially Silicon Valley Americans, the All In podcast audience. So here's their intro to him.
This speaker's not on the program. Not on the program, but I did notice there was a little bit of security here today. A little extra security. This is your Sachs red meat moment. Yes. Okay. All right, here we go. A little red meat for Sachs. Please welcome me in joining Vice Presidential candidate JD Vance.
Let your winners ride. Rain Man David Sachs. And I said, we open source it to the fans, and they've just gone crazy with it. Love you, Vance. Queen of Quinoa.
Hey guys, how are you?
For any new listeners here today, we got 179 watching right now and 68 likes. Please hit the like button. It helps us grow the channel. You can send a super chat or become a channel member as well. Member of the King Pilfer for just $5 a month, and that helps keep us going. I'm going to keep the video mostly cut off here because they've posted this on YouTube, and I don't have any idea if it's gonna trip an algorithm that's going to take it down. If it does, I'm going to keep playing it because I'm still streaming on X, and it will play on X. So if the YouTube stream goes down for whatever reason, jump over to X, watch it there. This is what I'm basically going to wrap the show with. So when I stop playing it, the YouTube stream will come back up again. So if you stay there, it'll come back up. But if you want to watch the whole thing and the stream goes down, go over to X. So I'm going to keep it mostly cut off.
All right, good to see you. What's up, man? How you doing? Shema, long time.
All right.
See you. Hey guys.
Welcome. So, Sachs is going to introduce you.
Welcome to the Lions Den.
Who's here with us, Sachs?
Well, do we actually need a big introduction here? But I'll give a few.
Those of you who are really bad at context clues, I'm JD Vance. I'm running for vice president.
And normally he's beside his wife Usha, but now you get.
That's right. She's at like the tar pits or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
We brought our 3 kids out here, so she wanted to take and see some fossil stuff. So they'll have fun.
Well, I'll say a couple of things.
The dad. Mom's out taking care of the kids, going to the La Brea tar pits, which is a pretty cool place. Been there myself. The dad. He comes in, icebreaker, laughs, confident, self-assured, in his element. He's vibing.
Things about JD because he's a friend. I think what I think really made me want to support JD for Senate and also for the VP position is that I think he represents two, you could almost say, contradictions. Back in 2003, when JD graduated from high school, this was after the Twin Towers had come down and we had gotten involved in the Iraq War. He was gung-ho to go fight America's enemies, and he enlisted in the Marine Corps and went off to serve in the Middle East. Eventually, he came to realize that war was a mistake. And I thought that really represents one of the traits that we really want in a vice president or someone next to the president, which is that he had the patriotism and the courage to go serve America, but also the wisdom to realize when America shouldn't get involved in a war. So I want to just... The other, like I said, almost contradiction that JD represents is that he had worked in the tech industry. He had been a venture capitalist. He had been in rooms like this, and he understands what it takes to make America a more innovative place. At the same time, he comes from a part of the Midwest, Appalachia. That's a very poor part of the country and did not grow up in a privileged...
Sachs, the city boy. Appalachia, sir. I like this contrast that he's doing. This is good. This is good. Good communication, good framing. He's really setting up his character well. Josh says, "I really want JD to get strong and lose the baby face." You know, So I recognize what the significance of having JD Vance be the vice president was. That it was my focus wasn't really on like the electoral public relations side. It was what it signifies him, the interest that he's bringing to bear on Trump, and then the position that he's going to occupy with respect to taking the chainsaw to organized crime that goes under the name the deep state, the administrative state, the managerial bureaucracy, whatever name you want to give it, it's organized crime. And he is an avowed enemy of them and is a tip of the spear for the coalition that wants to destroy that aspect of that is infiltrating the American government. That was what I was focused on. I didn't fully appreciate just how effective of a public relations operator he is. I mean, I was like, okay, the debate, there's a good chance he probably does really well. Like when I was, this was maybe a month ago or whatever, I was looking forward to the debate. I was like, yeah, there's a pretty good chance he does really well. Walls is gonna humiliate himself, but I think there's also the chance that JD kind of gets stuck on something and kind of bumbles or whatever. Man, I've been so impressed by what I've seen from him lately, and in this conversation, the way he acquits himself and all of this. It's I think the baby face, the sort of unimposing, very down home, sort of ordinary guy, actually works very much in his favor. He comes across as just kind of like a dude you just want to go grab a beer with, sort of chilling, whatever. And then he starts talking, and it's like he's very disarming, so he can slip the dagger under the armor much easier. Joshua Dorton, commenting from Twitter, says, thanks for this, man. Been at work all day listening to everyone talk about how Kamala destroyed Trump. I'm the only one who disagreed, and it's been a disheartening day, so thanks for bringing my spirit back up at the stream. You got it, man. That's what we're here for. Andrew says, Vance is the height of millennial excellence. Yes. He is our millennial king.
Environment at all. And he still remembers those people and he represents those people. And I think his ability to understand both parts of the country makes him, I'd say, a pretty unique political figure. So with that, let me stop. And do you want to react to any of that?
Well, first of all, thanks all for having me. I've been a big fan of the pod for a while. I think my first appearance, so it's good to be with you. The only thing I'll say to that, David, is I do think there is a deep connection between the poverty that I saw growing up and the fact that our entire economy is just less innovative than we pretend that it is. And I know Peter Thiel and Tyler Cowen and other folks have talked about this, but if you look at the real innovation of the American economy, it's been in the world of software. If you look at where the economy has been most stagnant, it's been in basically the heavily regulated parts of the economy, which is where 90% of the people that I represent in the Senate and 80% of the people that I hope to represent as their vice president actually make their living, run their business, and go to work every single day. And I think that, when I think about tech, one of the things I'd like us to do is broaden the aperture a little bit and think about innovation, not just in software, but innovation in transportation and logistics and innovation in energy and the whole suite of things, because unless our economy is actually technologically innovative, then the stagnant economy is fundamentally like the worst thing. And I think a lot of actually America's pathologies right now stem from the fact that we feel like we live in a very zero-sum country, because in some ways we do. Right, when the economy is growing 4%, 5%, 6% a year, then Democrats can kind of get what they want, Republicans can kind of get what they want, and it all makes sense. If the economy is growing between 0 and 1% a year, then I think it makes the whole society and our political system a much more insane. And I think that's kind of a subtext of what's been going on in this country for the last 30 years.
So the last two clips that I played with him was him speaking to a normie audience, effectively, and speaking normie. Here, by default, the audience that he's talking to, the All In podcast audience, if they're listening to that show and they're so into it that they're going to show up for a live event like this, they're in California, or people who are flying to California for this. This is a high IQ audience. So this is him. You're seeing him actually in his natural element. This is where he's speaking to his cohort, his class of people, and this is a point that actually is an overture to the accelerationist wing, because this is one of the points they talk about, that growth for growth's sake, the reason why we need growth and expansion is because of this zero-sum effect. If there is no growth, then if we actually begin thinking of ourselves as living with a fixed pie, then you get conflict. This is something he and Trump have both hit on. Like Trump talking about Roe v. Wade and JD echoing it, that this is an issue that's just been dividing us completely. We need the unity ticket. We don't need to be constantly divided and fighting over a fixed pie of resources. We can generate more. We can grow. We can build. We can actually be civilized. Because this contributes to the civilized mindset, is the idea of hope and belief in something bigger and better. Having something to strive for, having goals, having aspirations. This is why there are demoralization and blackpilling campaigns coming out of the regime, because its express purpose of existence is to destroy what's good, to break our spirits, to beat down our will, to convince us that there is nothing good to fight for, that there are no good things, there are no narratives, there are no mythologies, there are no great men, there are no heroes. Destroy all the hierarchies. Eliminate the scaffolding upon which human thriving is built. It's craven. This is powerful.
Let me start by going back a little bit. I think three of us initially would have been described sort of like, non-Trump people.
Yep.
And in different ways and shapes and form, we were all vocal about it because of what was presented to us through the filter of the media. And we've all gone through an evolution in large part by meeting the person. And this is the first time actually where a presidential candidate I've known, and I've kind of known a vice presidential candidate in this case as well, they try to corner you and paint you in a certain way. Can you just talk about what you realized and the person that you got to know and what it says about what we need to do so that we don't get manipulated?
Yeah. So first of all, when Biden was running against Trump, one of the things the media tried to do is to say, well, you have these two guys who are a little bit older than average, and both of them clearly aren't fully with it. And I would hear the media talk about Biden like this and then talk about Trump like this. And it's like, guys, Donald Trump remembers exactly what I said about him 9.5 years ago to the minute, to the day, to the exact line. Like, trust me, his memory is 100% there, even if it would be more in my interest if it wasn't. And, what changed for me, I mean, two things. I mean, one, Chamath, you just sort of hit on this, is a lot of the things the press said about Donald Trump and says about Donald Trump are just straight up fabrications. And so if you think the press is like biased, that's one thing. But if you think the press is fundamentally trying to tell you the truth, even if it's in a biased way, and then you realize that like Donald Trump never called white supremacists very fine people after Charlottesville, a total fabrication of the American media. It's like, okay, what other things am I hearing about Donald Trump that are actually not true, right? The second thing is, we talked about
the same thing there. The thing you hit on before with the memes. The subject of the purpose of debunking the narrative is not simply for the debunk. Don't get bogged down on that. You got to take it to the next level. You were lied to on this point, and the point isn't this specific point. The point is that this is an indicator of a broader pattern.
About this a little bit last night, but look, if you go back to the year of my birth, which is 1984, there's this chart that's really interesting, and it tracks corporate profits, the wages of workers, and the size of government. And for pretty much my entire life, the wages of workers were stagnant, corporate profits were going up, and the size of government was going up. And there was a 4-year period where the wages of workers outpaced the size of government corporate profits. It's the 4 years that Donald Trump was president. And I think that we have to give some credit to where it's due. The policies actually work. And if
hear that applause on that point? And think about the types of people that he's speaking to here. These are going to be overwhelmingly white-collar professionals, managers themselves, people who live in the technology space, but who are also, because they're in that space, they're completely drowning in shitlibbery all the time. They're the people who are most subjected to DEI and ESG and all of the propaganda. They may even be the people who have been involved in perpetrating those things on people because of the culture they're coming out of. And they because of that, they also have this perception of, they're the lib, they're the guy who, they're pro-labor, they're in favor of the little guy, and there's probably sympathetic with Bernie Sanders, and he's speaking their language to them. Corporate profits have been ballooning while wages have been stagnating. Donald Trump is not the elite guy. He's the common man's guy.
you go into the presidency saying, I don't think Donald Trump's going to be a good president, and then lo and behold, he's the best president, at least in a generation, it's like, okay, time to change my mind, admit to myself, but also to all the people who listen to me, I was wrong about Donald Trump. He was a hell of a good president. Of course, I'm running as his running mate, because I think he'll do it again.
Let's flip it around now. What does it say?
Chamath's reply here is, or Chamath, I think Chamath's reply here is really, really good. I want to highlight, though, what he said here, that he's leaning into the fact that he was anti-Trump. He was the never Trump guy. And then he changed his mind when presented with new opinions, or with new facts and opinions. He changed his opinion because the facts changed. So he's taking the I was once never Trump thing and actually rolling it into a strength. But not a strength for himself, a strength for Trump. This is perfect right-hand man behavior.
About him that how's that process of saying JD, you said this. Yes, I did. I changed my mind. But then he has to change his mind. So that says something.
Yeah.
So talk us about that.
You know, I think the president, one thing I'll say about him is, again, the media perception of Donald Trump is that he's like this deeply aggrieved guy who holds really terrible grudges. The actual reality of Donald Trump is that, yeah, he remembers what you said about him because it's like part of the inputs that he takes as he tries to evaluate a human being. But most importantly, he's asking, like, what can you do now? How can you help the country now? How can you help me as I try to help the country now? And I think for whatever complicated set of factors, he decided that I was the guy who could help him the most. But no, I mean, it is interesting. The perception of him as this guy who holds grudges. He selected a guy who was very much a critic of his back in 2015 as his running mate. Clearly something doesn't make sense. And I think that what doesn't make sense is this idea that Trump is more motivated by grievance than he is by the public interest. He's actually much more motivated by the public interest. That's the truth. That's awesome.
You're, thanks for coming.
Of course.
You're going to replace Mike Pence.
I hope so.
Yeah. As, it's
have to win
going to be a
first.
close election, but
J-Cal can't help himself. You're going to replace Mike Pence, assuming the conclusion already.
if you do, Mike Pence, your new boss, Trump, is a little upset at Mike Pence because Mike Pence refused to overturn the election results. And
this now you guys are going to see. This is where things get fun here. They pick up right now. There's a little tension on the panel. And then it really blows out later on when we get down to the how to practically approach deportations, who's coming in through the southern border. When we get to that, things are really going to take off in a fun way.
if you were in that same position, what would you do? Would you have overturned the election results?
Well, I think let me take issue with the premise a little bit, Jason, because I don't think the argument was Mike Pence could overturn the election results. I think the argument was that Mike Pence could have done more, whether you agree or disagree. Mike Pence could have done more to sort of surface some of the problems in the 2020 election.
Would you have not certified the
Well,
election?
I think that what I would have done, I mean, look, I happen to think that there were issues back in 2020, particularly in Pennsylvania. Even, some of the courts that refused to throw out certified ballots did say that there were ballots that were cast in an illegal way. They just refused to actually decertify the election results in Pennsylvania. Do I think that we could have had a much more rational conversation about how to ensure that only legal ballots are cast? Yes. And do I think that Mike Pence could have played a better role? Yes. But again, the two premises that I take issue on is, one, Pence was not asked to overturn the election. He couldn't have. But two, the reason—
He was asked to not certify it.
Sure.
So would you have certified? I'll ask you for the third
Again,
time.
I would have asked the states to submit alternative slates of electors.
You got to remember, these guys are friends. These guys are friends. This is how much of a slimy little weasel J-Cal is.
And let the country have the debate about what actually matters and what kind of an election that we had.
You wouldn't have
certified
certified, to be clear.
I would have asked the states to submit alternative slates of
I think
electors. That's what I would have
So-
done. Again, I've said that publicly many times. But again, Jason, the important part is we would have had a big debate. And it doesn't necessarily mean the results would have been any different, but we at least would have had the debate in Pennsylvania and Georgia about how to better have a rational election system where legal ballots are cast. And again, look, I have no personal problem with Mike Pence. I've never really talked to him. But I think that the idea that the reason Mike Pence isn't on board with Donald Trump is over the election of 2020. That's the other thing I want to take issue with, Jason, because I think in reality that if Donald Trump wanted to start a nuclear war with Russia, Mike Pence would be at the front of the line endorsing him right now.
Kaboom!
And fundamentally, the reason the old guard of the Republican Party hates Donald Trump, it's not because of January the 6th, 2021, whatever your views on it. It's because Donald Trump doesn't think that we should start stupid wars in foreign countries, and that's why they all hate him.
Again, I'll accept the mea culpas. You can drop them in the live chat. You can tweet them at me. You can email them to me. You can give us some money and jump in the King Pill Discord and give them to me. This is masterful. As the interview is getting hostile, completely maintains his composure. Even though he's in a friendly territory, and now he's kind of getting blindsided by a friend. Completely maintains his composure, rejects the framing of it, endorses the fact that, yeah, there were issues with the election, brings those back up, and then pivots it immediately to rejecting the frame of even the premise of the question. Mike Pence isn't and Donald Trump's rift isn't over the results of the election. It's because Mike Pence would be at the front of the line, saber rattling for a nuclear war with Russia. This is red meat to the crowd, and it completely takes the wind out of the whole line of questioning.
I have a follow-up on that.
Let me continue my line of questioning, then I'll give it to you. Because I want to hear JD's since he's here. I've heard yours many times. So
How many follow-ups? How many follow-ups are you going to have about January 6th? We spend 20 minutes talking about.
I want to hear David, especially if it gets me out of answering tough questions. So,
I think you've had like 3 follow-ups on J6. First of all, Freeberg, you never got a chance to ask your question.
I want to talk about. Well, let's talk about January 6th for the next 45 minutes. I'm sure it's the most important thing going on in the country right now.
Can we talk about policy for a minute?
That'd be great.
Okay.
I'd love that.
I'll just reflect back on your comment about government growth compared to wage growth compared to corporate profits. There's only so much capital, it gets sucked up somewhere.
Right.
There's competing interests that suck it up. The government is a competing interest that sucks up capital, fundamentally. The government has been successful in sucking up capital, and ultimately
So the IQ of the conversation just jumped by like 50 points. And watch how seamlessly he transitions with this.
Government has been proven time and again to be the least efficient way to grow the economy of allocating capital allocators or labor. And Trump has made this commentary that Elon, who's going to be here later today, should come in and help right-size the government. You've now spent a few years as a senator. This is my most distressing issue, right? Of all the panic attacks I have that Jason teases me about. It's government spending, the debt level, and ultimately you reach a tipping point, I believe, in democracies where the government is spending. More people are dependent on the government than are not, and that ultimately leads to a very bad outcome for democracy. That's how I feel. And so based on what you've seen as a senator now for the last few years, and based on the commentary that Elon, where would you go in, cut? Where's the most kind of efficiency gaining opportunity that we can kind of execute against without needing to go and negotiate with Congress? What's the opportunity ahead for the executive branch to right-size government, to make things more efficient, to hold things accountable, to improve the way that the government is functioning, which I think ultimately leads to better economic growth and opportunity for innovation because capital flows to the right places.
So I agree with you. And let me say 2 things, and I'll try to answer briefly because I know there are a lot of topics that we can get through. So number one is, one of the things that our government should do, obviously, I think it should be doing less than it currently does, but what it does, I want it to do well. And most importantly, I want the critical social welfare functions of our government to go to the people who actually deserve to be here. Yeah. So as a United States Senator, I have asked multiple staff members, I've asked officials in various government departments, if you take the, give or take 25 million illegal aliens that are here in this country right now, how much money do we spend on illegal aliens every single year in this country? And I've gotten estimates that range between $100 billion a year to
So his question is about size of government and efficiency of government. And the first thing he goes to is immigration and illegal aliens. This is staying on message.
$600 billion a year. And where does that money come from? Well, it comes from healthcare benefits. Even though illegal aliens aren't entitled to Section 8 housing, their children are entitled to Section 8 housing. There's also a lot of Social Security fraud, a lot of Medicare fraud. So one thing that we could save a lot of money on is actually focusing our national interest on American citizens, people who deserve to be here. We'd save a lot of money that way. That'd be a huge and transformative thing.
$7.3 trillion budget, what do you estimate that impact to be?
Well, again,
and I'm trying to do that scene in the movie Dave where they go in and they just like line out, nope, or like Milady pulled everything off the board.
If you call it a $1.7 trillion deficit, right? Again, it's between $100 billion to $600 billion, depending on how you cut the numbers. Now, the other thing about that, just to answer your question about efficiency, is I think the government procurement process, especially in military equipment, is really broken. If you go,
Boom. This is another time. I'm going to say it again. Stormy Waters, 2-Bit podcast tonight. I think it's Jason. If you're still in the chat, or someone, if you can, do me a favor, go look up, go to the 2-Bit podcast, or go to his Twitter handle and see when that episode is dropping. I want to say that it's dropping at 9 p.m. Central or 9 p.m. Eastern tonight, but I don't know. Go listen to that conversation the minute that it drops.
Go back to Eisenhower's warning about the military-industrial complex. I mean, I was a seed investor in Anduril. I imagine you guys have some Anduril people here today.
We had Palmer Luckey here 2 years ago. Yeah, great chat with Jacob.
One of the things that company, as you know, and I haven't talked to the guys about the details of the business in the last few years, but one of the things that they founded the company on was the idea that the procurement process was broken. Yeah. And that is definitely true in we do way too much cost plus procurement and way too little actual spurring of innovation. And what it ends up meaning is that our equipment isn't as good as it should be, and we end up spending a lot more money than we should be. I actually do think you could cut the American defense budget and make our country stronger, but you would have to make the procurement process much more efficient. Now, that's a big thing to tackle, but that's what we're in this business of doing.
You have to pass legislation to do that.
I don't know that you have to pass legislation, but you really, as a president and vice president, you have to be willing to take on some very powerful defense contractors, and that's something that I know President Trump and I very much want to do.
And how would you like your role as vice president to be cast? Differentially from how other vice presidents have operated, what would your role as an individual be, just speaking about?
I want to do all of the good things and none of the bad things. That's my goal as vice president. That's
so the ribbon cuttings of the new federal.
I mean, look, I mean, obviously joking, but the reality is that I want to be a second set of eyes and ears for the president's agenda, right? One of the things that was true, and he will tell you this, the first time he was president of the United States, is there were people in government, there were people in his own administration that he was a newcomer to politics. He didn't fully trust everybody who was around him. We want to build a team who's actually aligned on the agenda, because agree or disagree with Donald Trump on a specific policy issue, assuming the American people make him the next president, and I think that they will, that is the next president. And his policy determinations should dictate the executive administration of government. If they don't, we don't have a real democracy. And by the way,
if you're pro-democracy, you are pro-Trump accomplishing his agenda once he's elected. And JD's responsibility is to be a second set of eyes and ears for the boss. It keeps coming back to the boss's agenda. And the boss's agenda is informed by the mandate that he's given by the people. This is such powerful framing.
just not to way back into January 6th territory, like what is a bigger threat to American democracy? Is it that we had a big fight about some of the certification in January the 6th, and of course you had some rioters at the Capitol, or is it that, for example, the Joint Chiefs of Staff didn't obey the President of the United States on troop redeployments in Syria, which actually happened during Trump's administration? Like, if we're going to talk about threat.
Oh my God. Which is a greater threat to democracy? Having a debate over the certification, or the Joint Chiefs disobeying orders from the Commander-in-Chief directly related to illegitimate military conflicts and the death of American service members? This is holy shitballs, man.
Threats to democracy, we need the government to be responsive to the American people's elected president. If you don't have that, you don't have a real democracy.
How much?
Round of applause.
A lot of this, if you design it in one way, has to go through Congress, which, as we know, is sclerotic and basically nothing can happen. And then the other path is for you guys to go ham a little bit and say, okay, what can we do with executive order? Have you had a chance to discuss, if you win, repositioning the focus as basically that? What is the totality of everything that we can do from the White House, from the Oval, and then getting all of these? And the other thing that we should talk about at some point is like, it's like an Avengers movie now at this point. You, Bobby Kennedy, Elon, Trump. So, but
I don't. The Justice League.
The Justice League.
I don't know which character in that Justice League I am.
No, but the point is, like, you know, have you had that discussion about, like, all right, folks, let's not wait for Congress and get a plan ready starting day one of all the stuff that can happen through EOs? Or how are you thinking about this?
Well, at a high level, certainly, you know, I'm one of the co-chairs of the transition team. There are a few others of us who are working on it. You just sort of think about, I mean, look, the way the founders set up our government, whether you like it or not, there are certain things, especially when it comes to budget and appropriations, you just have to go through Congress, right? You fundamentally have to. Now, I do think that Congress is willing to work with us at least, you know, the first couple of years of an administration. You can largely get the budgetary and appropriations things that you need. But there's a lot that you can do through EO. And by the way, in a lot of ways, I think the enlargement of the president at the expense of Congress is a bad thing. But fundamentally, there is a lot that happens in our government purely through executive orders, through EOs. And yes, we're thinking very deliberatively about all the things that you could do through EOs on day one or in the early parts of the administration. And again, not to make this too partisan, but one of the ways that Biden and Harris opened up the American southern border was through executive orders, right? It was an executive order.
We're talking about immigration, folks. It's going to keep coming back to immigration.
Submitted deportations, an executive order that ended the Remain in Mexico policy. So you can screw up a lot through EOs. You can also fix a lot through EOs, which is certainly something that we're focused on.
Let me go in a different direction. Just in the last couple of days, Dick Cheney endorsed Kamala Harris for president. And that endorsement was warmly embraced by Kamala Harris and the Democrats.
The same people called him a war criminal like 3 years ago.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm old enough to remember back in 2008, Obama first beat Hillary Clinton in the Democratic primary because he had opposed the Iraq war and she had supported it.
Okay, hold on. We got to come back to this in just a minute. But holy crap. We live in the best timeline. Firefighters in Shanksville, Pennsylvania convinced Biden to wear a Trump 2024 hat. Oh, look at this big goober. We were just memeing this yesterday. Cats putting MAGA hats on Kamala. And the next day, Biden puts a fucking MAGA hat on. Oh my God. Can you imagine the absolute pants shitting that is happening among the Democrats right now? This picture is going to get so much traction. Can you imagine the absolute uproarious laughter happening at the Trump campaign right now? Oh, this is so good. Black pillars, eternally BTFO. All right, let's get back to this. We're going to back it up a little bit so we catch this context. Actually, oh yeah, we'll just keep going with it.
Rios, which is certainly something that we're focused on.
Let me go in a different direction. Just in the last couple of days, Dick Cheney endorsed Kamala Harris for president. And that endorsement was warmly embraced by Kamala Harris and the Democrats.
The same people called him a war criminal like 3 years ago.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm old enough to remember back in 2008, Obama first beat Hillary Clinton in the Democratic primary because he had opposed the Iraq War and she had supported it. And then he got elected president of the United States. And the whole country seemed to recognize that the Iraq War had been a disaster. It destabilized the Middle East. I don't need to go through all the litanies of horribles that happened from it. But there seemed to be a widespread recognition. And like you're saying, Dick Cheney was kind of demonized as this, like the Darth Vader, Prince of Darkness type figure, which I think basically was right. I mean, he was the principal architect of the Iraq War.
And now I find myself agreeing with everything the Democrats said in 2008 about Dick Cheney.
Right.
Total coincidence.
On a separate track, a few weeks ago, we had Bobby Kennedy endorse Donald Trump. So you now have a dynamic where the Bush Republicans are now Harris Democrats, and the Kennedy Democrats are now Trump Republicans. Right. Clearly, something big is happening in our politics here. Can you explain this realignment? How do you see it?
Yeah, I mean, look, one way to think about it is that we traded Dick Cheney for Bobby Kennedy, and that's an upgrade I'll take every single day.
What a line.
Look, I mean, one way of understanding is you have to ask yourself who has benefited and who has harmed from the last 30 years of the bipartisan consensus in this country, right? So you want to talk about
the last 30 years of the bipartisan consensus in this country.
A manufacturing policy that I think promoted the offshoring of millions of good American manufacturing jobs, and in the process, by the way, made us less self-reliant as a country. That really benefited people like Dick Cheney and Kamala Harris and their donors. It didn't benefit the people that I serve in the state of Ohio. Okay, if you ask yourself who actually went off and fought these ridiculous wars, it was very often working and middle-class kids in communities like mine. It wasn't the family of our current leadership class, by and large, though of course there are exceptions. And you go through each of these issues.
Man, highlighting the very legitimate class warfare, making this a family issue. This is their family against yours.
What you find is increasingly Republicans are the party of working and middle class people. Bobby Kennedy has talked about this a lot. I think he puts it better than I ever could, but that, you go back even 30 years ago and approximately 80% of the counties that represent, 80% of the wealth in American counties went in places that voted Republican, and about 20% of the wealth went to places that voted Democrat. Now it's 70% of the wealth goes for Democrats and about 30% of the wealth goes for Republicans. And you saw this in a big way. I mean, just one illustration is I believe that in 2012, Wall Street, which I think Wall Street fundamentally has been the main beneficiary of globalization of a lot of the policies that I pushed back against and criticized over the last 30 years. Wall Street went 3-1 for Romney over Obama in 2012. I believe they went 4-1 for Clinton over Trump in 2016, and then like 9-1 for Biden over Trump in 2020. So there was a massive shift in who makes up these parties.
Wealthy people direct their money to Democrats.
Increasingly, wealthy people direct their money to Democrats. Working and middle class people direct their money to Republicans.
Why do you think that is, JD?
Again, because I think their policies have benefited. Look, the uniparty,
his audience doesn't want to think of themselves as wealthy people. They don't see themselves as elites. They're overwhelmingly coming from Democrat circles where they have all these fantasies of themselves being the poor oppressed Democrats subjected to the oppression of the evil big business Republicans. This is the audience that he's speaking to. So making this observation that the Democrats are the party of the rich, corrupt people who hate America, nobody wants to identify with that. No, I'm the guy. I'm a little guy. I stand with the little guys.
Kamala Harris's and Dick Cheney's, their parties have benefited a certain group of people. Those people are increasingly Democrats. Donald Trump has been pushing back against that consensus, and his party and his policies, I think, benefit the majority of the country. So increasingly, I think the working middle class heart of the country is going for Republicans.
He's also subtly indicating here that this is effectively a third party. It's called Republican, but it's effectively an insurgent third party.
Another spin on this, because I know we're focused on tech in this conference, is big tech has become increasingly pro-Democrat, little tech has become increasingly pro-Republican, right? So if you're an upstart, if you're in crypto, if you're like a small AI company, I think you're much more likely to be pro-Republican. If you're a monopolist in big tech, I mean, look at Facebook, Google, how they're putting their resources. It's much more pro-Democrat. So there are a lot of different spins on it, but fundamentally, I think the people who've benefited from the American decline are becoming Democrats. The people who have suffered from it and are pushing back against it are Republicans.
I have a follow-up question on that, JD, which is you were a venture capitalist for a period, and Lina Khan has essentially taken M&A off the table. You well know that if we can't get
M&A being mergers and acquisitions,
those singles and doubles in the industry, it kind of freezes the industry, and we have a problem with returns, which then is creating a secondary order problem where we can't get LPs to put more money into funds because we're not getting those returns. What's the proper way to look at M&A? Because you want to break up big tech, from what I understand, and you have a major problem with big tech. You mentioned little tech. What's the proper M&A architecture, to balance those two goals there?
Yeah, so this is obviously very complicated. Jason, you probably understand this better than I do, but as somebody, by the way, who's defended Lina Khan against some of her critics from the right, I think what Lina Khan fundamentally gets correct is that big tech really is a threat. It's a threat to free speech. It's increasingly oligarchic. It controls too much of what we're allowed to say. And also, it controls a lot of the ways in which capital gets invested in these various ecosystems. But where I think Lina Khan goes wrong is that you're exactly right. Like, you need the singles and doubles. You need sometimes a medium-sized company to buy a smaller company for $300 million, right? That liquidates founders. That gives the venture fund some money to go back into the system. And I think that, I don't know her super well, but my basic read on Lina is that she is so anti-monopoly as sort of a baseline bias, and that becomes anti-merger and acquisition as a baseline bias, that Google buying YouTube is a much different thing from a $2 billion market cap healthcare company buying a $500 million market cap healthcare company. And I think that we have to sort of draw a very big distinction between little tech and big tech. And look, I'm going to keep on making that argument both in public and private to Lina, and hopefully she comes around to our view a little bit, because I do think some of her ideas on big tech are right.
I think a good place for us to pivot would be the border. And just talking about this issue more from first principles, when President Trump came on the podcast, we talked about, hey, maybe really talented people, we should recruit them to our country and give them green cards. But very quickly, your group walked that back a bit. It's such a political hot potato, and it doesn't seem to me that it needs to be, but you spent a lot of time in government now. Why can't politicians just do what 80% of the country wants, which is allow very talented people into the country, close the border, and make it like a more point-based system like Canada, Australia, and everybody else? Like, why is this so weaponized by both of your parties?
Well, I think the reason why it's so difficult right now, and I mean, look, generally I agree that, okay, we're going to let some immigrants in. We want them to be high talent, high quality people. You don't want to let a large number of illegal aliens in. Obviously that's President Trump's view. But I think that the reason why it's so broken down right now is because you have 25 million illegal aliens in this country. And you can't fix what I would call the minor or sort of less important immigration question until you fix the real problem. And part of that goes back, by the way, to the way in which the system got broken in the first place. So Ronald Reagan, of course, great governor of California, a great president, but Reagan did in 1986 a massive amnesty program where in some ways he was trying to do exactly what you're talking about. Fix the problem of people who are already here, make sure that our immigration system is more pro-skill, but also close down the border. And what happened is we got all the amnesty, but we didn't get the closing down of the border. And so in order to do anything, I think, meaningful on immigration policy, meaning legal immigration policy, you've got to close down the border and establish some basic order. And to go back to first principle.
He's able to both pay lip service to Reagan, which everyone in our circles who whines and complains about Reagan, he's still wildly respected by virtually everyone except for the worst shit libs, loudly counter-signaling Reagan is politically retarded. But what he does here is actually kind of subversively slide in this idea that one of the things Reagan did, and I would say one of many things, EMTALA would be another big one. One of the things he did with this amnesty bill is actually made the problem much worse. If you try to solve both of these problems at the same time, if you try to get like the perfect solution without dealing with the urgent existential issue, you're going to make things worse.
Here, I think that people who are generally, I mean, look, this is, I'm sure, a very diverse crowd, and I'm sure there are a lot of immigrants in this crowd, legal immigrants, hopefully. I'm married to the daughter of legal immigrants in this country, and I, of course, love not just my wife, but the whole extended family. I do think they brought a lot to this country.
Three of us are legal immigrants.
Yeah. But here's the thing. When you allow 25 million people into this country, it breaks down the entire social compact, right? So think about this. Okay, you're down on your luck. You lost your job. You get unemployment insurance. You're really down on your luck. You need food assistance from the federal government. I believe, as a conservative, that part of being in the same American family, whether your family's been here for a generation or 10 generations, is that we support people who are down on the luck. We don't want a cradle-to-grave welfare state, but we want to support people. We don't want kids who are dying because of starvation, because of no fault of their own. We want to promote some basic fairness, and we want to help people out when times get tough. But you can't do that if you extend that generosity to tens of millions of people who can't even be here in the first place. And I think that what Kamala Harris has done at the border, it's not just bad economically, it's not just bad for public safety. She has eroded the very foundation of the social contract in this country. And we talk about division in our politics, and Kamala has this ridiculous slogan, "We're not going back." The reason why politics is so divided is because she has turned American citizens against one another while she's placed the interests of illegal aliens above American citizens. You want to turn the page and get back to common American citizenship? Stop putting illegal aliens at the front of the line of American citizens.
Is the motivation...
Big round of applause.
Do you believe the motivation is endless empathy? Or is it as simple as we want new Democratic voters? Or is there a kind of not publicly spoken about economic argument about bringing wages down, having economic growth, having new buyers in the economy, that there's some benefit despite the $100 to $600 billion cost?
And I'll add another one.
That's a good question.
Yeah,
the endless empathy aspect.
Yeah, I mean,
empathy is different than guilt.
It's all of these things, right? I mean, so let me tell you a brief story, and this goes back to my changing my mind on Donald Trump. It's probably 2017, 2018. I was at a business conference, and I happened to be seated next to one of the largest hotel chain CEOs in America. And my wife was there, and we talk about this as the monopoly story because the guy is just going off. Maybe he'd had too much to drink. He's going off about how Donald Trump's immigration policies had forced him to raise the wages of his workers. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting fact. Like, explain more about this, sir, please. I want to understand. And he said, well, because we can hire a lot of immigrants, and frankly, we can hire a lot of illegal immigrants under the table, and we can't do that because there are fewer legal immigrants, so we have to pay our American citizen workers more money. And I'm like, oh, shit, that sounds pretty good, actually. Isn't that like what we want, is for people to be earning higher wages for doing a good job? So there's definitely an economic piece of it. But I also think, I mean, look, this is chilled out a little bit, partially because we're in an election year. If Kamala Harris won, I think it would come back with a vengeance. But think about all these like ridiculous land acknowledgments, right? Where people say, well, you know, I want to acknowledge that this belonged to like this tribe before I was here. And if you genuinely think that you have to acknowledge a Native American tribe from 300 years ago, then one attitude that comes along with this is, why can I control at all who comes into the country, right? I have no right. Yeah. There's this basic, I think this is the empathy, it's the guilt, it's sort of all these things.
But all structural norms degrade.
Exactly. I have no right to say who comes into my community. And I think, again, it's deranged, but I think that's part of it. I think the economic piece of it is part of it. It's certainly a vote argument. I mean, Democrats will say this. Of course, Republicans are accused of racism for just repeating what Democrats have said. When somebody like Chuck Schumer says, well, you know, we're going to have an emerging Democratic majority because we're going to have all these new immigrants, and all the old Americans, well, they're going to vote for Republicans, but we're going to replace them with a bunch of new people who vote for Democrats. It's like, that's pretty sick. But again, if you call it out, you're somehow a racist, even though Chuck Schumer is himself calling it out as if it were a good thing.
I just want to ask on a different topic now. Thank you for talking about the border.
Can I just have one final on this topic?
Okay.
Here's where things start getting fun.
Which is your plan is to deport tens of millions of these people. Tell us how that will happen practically. How are you going to take millions of people, put them in cuffs, drag them out while people have their cell phones out recording this, or is that just Trump being Trump?
Well, Jason, it's I like it.
You like the balance in the podcast?
Yeah, I do. No.
In fairness, JD told me, ask the hard questions, please. I want to address them head on.
I think Jason should be on the left and David should be on my right.
Where am I going? He's been pulling me to the right. I'll go to the audience.
It's funny, he didn't have any of these hard questions for Reid Hoffman. I don't know why.
Jason, wait, do you want me to leave the left and go to the right?
Jason,
I'm on the left right now, but I could go right.
Okay, yeah, I guess it depends on perspective. It's my perspective here.
It's a good debate,
but you know, Jason, if the VC thing doesn't work out, you'd make a great panelist at CNN. So, by the way, I love this, and I genuinely think like this is what a person who wants to be your vice president should actually do, is answer some tough questions.
I do give you credit for that. That you will face the hard questions. So back to the question. Tell me about dragging millions of people out of the country.
Jason, here's why I find this question a little off, and I will answer it, but it's like somebody who comes to me and I'm like eating my lunch and they say, look, that sandwich is 10 times the size of your mouth. How are you possibly going to eat that whole sandwich? And it's like, well, I'm going to take a first bite, and then I'm going to take a second bite, and then I'm going to take a third bite, and eventually the problem's going to be, look, you start out with 1 million people who are what we call criminal migrants, people who have committed violent crimes in some form or another, get them out of our country, yes, handcuff those people and force them out of the country. But you also do other things simultaneously. First of all, you stop the bleeding, right? You undo Kamala Harris's policies that open the southern border in the first place. I've got a piece of legislation in the United States Senate that we've got a lot of colleagues who have signed up for it, which would tax remittances, right? Because we know a lot of people are earning money and then sending it back to Central America or wherever they came from. If you end that practice, then you have a lot of people who go back willingly. I think you ought to make it harder for people to hire illegal labor as opposed to American citizens. You tick through these things, and I do think that, that's the sandwich approach to this, is you try to take it one step at a time. But the most important thing, and I think the deportations focus, again, it is important because we are going to deport people, but the most important thing is to stop the bleeding. You've got to stop the millions of people flowing across the southern border every single year. It happened because of Kamala Harris's policies. It's going to stop when Donald Trump is president.
Let me ask a national security question.
Yeah.
There's a lot of videos.
Just absolutely dominated that entire exchange. Look at how he's controlling the stage. He's relaxed, chilled out, on his game, and he's in his element. Like, this is his culture. But he is a savage operator. Eric Winter says, all things I wanted to hear my leader say. Yes. John says, JD sets up checkmates faster than a Magnus Carlsen speed match. Yes. He is just on top of all of this. I'll put it out again. I will take the mea culpas. You can send them to me.
Elon's gone down there, Bobby Kennedy's gone down there, you've gone down there.
Sure.
And the interdictions are not necessarily coming from countries in Central and South America anymore. They're coming from places in, near Asia, and a lot of places that you wouldn't normally think people coming from, Middle East, etc. From a national security perspective, what do we think is happening?
Yeah.
Why is that happening?
Yeah. So, part of the reason it's happening is
right, it's not Hondurans necessarily.
Right. No, that's right. No,
Iranians.
It's Iranians.
Yeah.
It's people from all over Asia, Africa, Europe. I mean, look, if you look at this, that is the open door, right? So if you want to come to this country, that is the open door, and God knows why some of them want to be here. I mean, given what's going on in the Middle East, I do worry about military-age males from Iran coming to this country through the American southern border. But I actually asked a border patrol agent about this on one of my visits, and great guy, was actually kind of heartbroken because he signed up to protect his country, and he's a relatively recent immigrant. I could tell that by his accent. This guy's very nervous and very heartbroken about the fact that he can't do his job. And he told me this story, and I feel like an idiot in hindsight because he's like, we have a guy who came in here. I asked the guy, why do you think this guy's Iranian? And he said, well, because he came through and he said that he was Mexican. And I was like, well, couldn't he have been Mexican? He said, well, he didn't speak Spanish. It's like, oh, that's a tell. Guy, Mexico, legal alien, doesn't speak Spanish. That's probably a pretty significant tell. But it's happening because this is what Kamala Harris has done. She's created this massive gap in our national security, and people are taking advantage of it. It's really not that surprising.
JD, let me just ask you one more foreign policy question on China. So there's a balancing act with China, but the rhetoric is that's our enemy. There's going to be a Cold War. The structural relationship that the United States has with China is a very kind of codependent relationship. They buy our bonds. I guess they're selling them off now. We buy a lot of product from them. Yeah. It allows us to go into a Walmart and get $40 scooters for our kids or $20 scooters for our kids. The technology industry is deeply dependent on a supply chain coming from China. There's a great commercial interdependency with China. They have historically been a very important partner to the United States and our economic prosperity. And I know the argument about hollowing out the middle class and so on because of moving everything offshore to China, but how do we rip that Band-Aid off and not cause massive problems with inflation? How do we not drive the cost of everything up by tariffing things that are coming in from China? What's the way forward with China? Is it necessarily a deeply kind of divisive Cold War, or is there a path here that allows us to maintain a balanced trading relationship and kind of a peaceful transition with China as they continue to build up their kind of capabilities economically and with energy, which I think is one of the biggest drivers for their success?
Well, so there's a lot there, and let me try to sort of take a few pieces of it because I know we're relatively short on time. So number one is the energy piece of it's very important. Part of the way that you reshore American manufacturing is that you open up American energy. It matters for crypto. It matters for AI. You've got to open up American energy or you're never going to have, whether it's the next generation of manufactured goods or the past 100%. Generations, you've got to open up American energy. Okay, that's number one. Number two is, look, I don't want to go to war with China. I think it would be hugely destructive, but I do think that we have to reshore more American manufacturing. And one of the weird things about China, if you think about past eras of developing nations, right? So go back to when the UK was the most advanced economy in the world and America was a developing nation. Well, one of the things that happened is that capital was flowing from the UK into the United States, right? From the developed into the developing nation. What's really weird about China is that it's like Americans borrow money from Chinese peasants to then buy the things the Chinese peasants are making for us, right? So it's not just the goods flow that's jacked up, it's the capital flows that are jacked up. And I really think that the next, Donald Trump is going to be the next president of the United States, and this is something we're going to have to figure out, is that you need to balance both the capital and the goods flows, okay? I'm not saying we're going to have absolutely no trade with China, but right now the relationship is fundamentally that the Chinese have figured out they can create a massively powerful producerist society while America becomes a weaker consumerist society. That is the broken nature of the relationship, and I think
they're becoming a more and more producer society. We're becoming a more and more consumer society. This cannot be sustained. We can't keep this up. This just flies directly in the heart of every single regime narrative, even down to the metaphysical, materialist level.
Rebalancing is the right way to think about it, but we have got to do it, and I think we're way behind the eight ball.
Maybe final question, but you said something which I thought was incredibly well said, so I just want to repeat it. When U.S. growth is 1% and 2%, everybody's fighting.
Exactly.
But when U.S. growth is 4 to 5%, everybody prospers.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through just how you think about how we get that extra 200 or 300 basis points of growth, and where you need to have less regulation so that you can have more entrepreneurship, or more regulation to kind of constrain folks? How do you think?
And less regulation for that energy sector.
Yeah, I mean, I really do think that we have to recognize that we have massively overregulated the real world, right? Overregulated transportation, overregulated energy, overregulated home construction. I don't know how easy it is to get another 300 bips of growth, but I think you could get a lot more growth, whether it's 300 or 150, just by massively reducing the amount of regulatory burden in the real economy. And again, I'm an optimist. I'm fundamentally an optimist on both, crypto, blockchain, Web3 stuff, but also on AI. And the way out of this may very well be to radically open up the way the technological innovation drives things in the United States. And just on this point about China, I don't know how much time we have, but I'll try to be quick about this. One of the things that Bob
Whatever time you need. Yeah.
Okay.
It's more about you.
All right. Well, I'm a politician, so buckle in. We're going to be for 3 hours later. But one of the real conceits of the 30 years of globalization that I think was really deranged. And
he's very effectively self-effacing as well. He's able to be like take little shots at himself, but does it in a confident way where it doesn't seem insufferable.
Real conceits of the 30 years of globalization that I think was really deranged, and in hindsight very wrong. Bob Lighthizer, who's Trump's trade representative, talks a lot about this, is we had this conceit that we could separate the manufacture of things from the design of things, right? So if you get an iPhone right now and you get it out of the box, you will see that it says designed in Cupertino, California. Of course, the implication is that it's manufactured in Shenzhen or wherever they're manufacturing iPhones these days. The idea that the iPhone is designed in Cupertino is increasingly no longer even true, right? It's something that we lie to ourselves about because the people who are doing all the manufacturing of the hardware of the iPhone are getting much better at design and innovation. And part of the reason why I care so much about this manufacturing thing is whether it's antibiotics, for example. Why hasn't America done an antibiotic in 30 years? It probably has something to do with the manufacture of antibiotics is done almost entirely in very low-cost manufacturing areas. You can go through a whole host of goods like this, but if you want to build a high-tech, high dynamic growth economy, you have to have some native manufacturing and some self-reliance. And so these two things are very related. And I think it's a big part of getting back to 4 or 5% growth is accepting that, yes, we're going to have trade, but we can't let everybody make all of our stuff.
Sachs, final question for you.
Yeah, well, I want to wrap this up because I think we're basically at time by just observing that both Donald Trump and JD Vance have been on this podcast. And it's not because I'm a crazy right winger. It's because we invited them.
Not just because.
Not just because. It's because we invited them and they accepted. We have similarly invited Kamala Harris and Tim Walz to
and Biden
be on
before that, but he forgot.
So we're still waiting.
He said yes. And he forgot. he lost the Zoom link.
So we want to
supposed to be on this call.
Yeah, we want to re-extend the invitation.
Yes, to be very clear.
Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, you're welcome to come on the podcast anytime, and the format will be similar.
Yeah, and I just want to say, JD, I think your answers were fantastic here today, and I really do appreciate you coming on and answering these questions very thoughtfully. And from my perspective, when I heard that you were announced as the VP, I thought, well, this is great. A young person who's got a lot of experience in venture capital and building things in the world, and somebody who comes from humble beginnings, like the four of us, and believes that a meritocracy where people work hard and get reward for it. So you check all my boxes in that way. Yeah, and I really think I feel much better. I have my issues with your boss, but when you talk about the bite-sized steps to it, I think one framework to look at your relationship with Trump is he says things at the top of at the highest vibration, we're going to deport 20 million people, and then you have a very practical approach. 60% tariffs makes no sense, but hey, we've got to rebalance this. And so I really do like your measured approach to this, and I think that you're a great counterbalance, and I think we understand why he picked you.
I want to say one thing. And this is not really related to anything except that you are not supposed to be here.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And that is really inspiring to other people who are not supposed to be here. Thank you.
Well, yeah.
I appreciate
and if you haven't read JD's book, I read your book long before all of this,
Incredible.
and I just want to say your book was so inspiring, and I have recommended it long before today to, literally hundreds of people. It's a fantastic read if you haven't read it.
Well, and by the way, available wherever books are sold.
You're like Jake out. Exactly. Do you have an affiliate link?
529 account for the kids. Can I just two things. First of all, Jason, I appreciate what you said, but I also just want to defend my running mate here, because I think that, again, the media doesn't often tell you the truth about Donald Trump. Donald Trump cares more about the details of public policy than almost anyone I've ever met in public life. That's actually real. He thinks about how this stuff affects the real economy and real Americans. So if you're on the fence, whether you like what I said or dislike what I said, I just encourage you, listen to what he actually says, because I think that you'll become a believer that he can make the country great again, as he promises. But separate from that, I just want to say this is such an important conversation, and you guys hold and host important conversations every single day. We should do more of it as a country, but I'm glad to participate today. God bless everyone. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, JD Vance.
All right, I decided to just let it roll, go through the whole thing. We were already most of the way through it, and it was that good. I have got to pee my brains out, so I'm going to make this quick. That was so honorable and magnanimous of him there at the end. He didn't have to make that extra statement. J. Cal kind of slobbed his knob a little bit and compared it and kind of threw Trump under the bus. And he didn't have to. He could have just accepted that and rolled with it, but he went out of his way to talk over the applause and go back and re-endorse Trump and reassert his loyalty to him. Just everything I could possibly dream of in a vice president in 2024. It is so good. All right. Thank you guys for showing up here. Again, 9 p.m. Eastern tonight, 2-Bit Podcast. Go listen to his conversation with Stormy Waters. Like the stream. We got 178 watching still, 90 likes. Let's get this over 100 before the stream is over. And to shamelessly acquire more likes, I give you guys Hulk.
They're my hero. And they tried to kill the next president of the United States. Enough was enough. And I said,